In this video, we're breaking down 2 hours of shocking Rick and Morty facts to fall asleep to. Let's get started. First up, we've got the fact that Rick and Morty started as an obscene Back to the Future parody. To understand how Rick and Morty came to exist, you need to know about Channel 101. This was a monthly film festival in Los Angeles that started in 2003. It was created by two people named Dan Harmon and Rob Schrab. These two had tried to make a pilot for Fox called Heat Vision and Jack, but it never got picked up by the network. After that failure, they decided to create their own platform where artists could show their work without network executives controlling everything. Channel 101 worked like a TV network, but the audience had all the power. Every month, people would submit short films that were under 5 minutes long. These films were supposed to be formatted like TV show pilots. Then a live audience would watch all the submissions and vote on which ones they liked. The shows that got the most votes would get to come back the next month with a new episode. The shows that got bad votes were canceled. It was brutal but fair. The whole concept was based on giving creators complete freedom to make whatever they wanted without worrying about what advertisers or studio bosses might think. Justin Roiland got involved with Channel 101 Inches 2004, 1 year after it started. At the time, Roiland was working as a producer on reality TV shows. He started making short films for the festival, and they were usually shocking and weird. His content often confused the audience because it was so strange and pushed boundaries. Most people at Channel 101 screenings had mixed reactions to his work. But Dan Harmon saw something in Roiland's humor. Even though the shorts were crude and uncomfortable, Harmon liked the originality behind them. The two started working together on various projects at Channel 101. This partnership would eventually lead to Rick and Morty, but that was still many years away. In early 2005, Roiland created an animated series for Channel 101 called House of Cosby's. The show was about a man named Mitchell Reynolds who was obsessed with comedian Bill Cosby. Mitchell built a cloning machine and used it to create multiple copies of Bill Cosby. Each clone had a different personality and special ability. The animation was crude and the humor was absurd, but audiences at Channel 101 loved it. House of Cosby's became the #1 show at the festival for 3 months straight. It was the first big success story to come out of Channel 101. The first episode premiered on the 30th of January 2005, and Roiland made 4 episodes total. Everything was going great until June 2005, when lawyers for Bill Cosby sent a cease and desist letter to Roiland and Dan Harmon. The letter said that Roiland was not authorized to use Bill Cosby's name, voice, or likeness. The lawyers demanded that House of Cosby's be taken down immediately and that no more episodes be made. This legal threat devastated Roiland. He was forced to stop making the show, even though it was his biggest success at the time. Dan Harmon initially took the episodes down from the Channel 101 website, but then put them back up when he realized the legal demands were unreasonable. Eventually, Cosby's lawyers went directly to the company that hosted the website's servers, and the episodes had to be removed for good. Roiland was only 23 years old at the time and was unemployed. The whole situation was humiliating, but something unexpected happened after the cease and desist letter became public. The media started reporting on the story, and suddenly people were talking about Justin Roiland. Because of all the attention, he ended up getting signed to the United Talent Agency and got a real talent agent. The legal threat had accidentally given him a boost in his career, but Roiland was angry about what happened with House of Cosby's. He knew that Bill Cosby was a client of Universal Studios, the company that owned the rights to Back to the Future. Roiland decided to get revenge by making fun of one of Universal's biggest movie franchises. He wanted to create something so offensive and blatant that it would troll Universal's lawyers the same way Bill Cosby's lawyers had gone after him. This was the beginning of Doc and Marty. In 2006, Roiland was fired from a television job that he found creatively stifling. He was frustrated and had a lot of creative energy with nowhere to put it. He decided to pour all of that energy into making a new short for Channel 101. His goal was simple: make the most vulgar and obvious parody of Back to the Future possible. He wanted Universal's lawyers to see it and get angry. Roiland originally wanted to call the short Back to the Future, the new official Universal Studios cartoon, featuring the new Doc Brown and Marty McFly, just to make it as provocative as possible. But he realized that would lead to an immediate lawsuit, so he changed the character names to Doc Smith and Marty McDonald's. He created the short with help from his production group called Comic Sacrifice. The animation was extremely crude and simple. It looked cheap on purpose. Roiland voiced both characters himself, doing impressions of the original Back to the Future voices. As he was recording the audio, something unexpected happened. Roiland became attached to the voices he was doing. He liked the dynamic between the two characters and started to see potential beyond just a one-time parody. He began to drop the protest aspect and just focused on making something funny with these characters. The first Doc and Marty short premiered at Channel 101 on October 29, 2006. The plot was deliberately simple and offensive. It started with a character named Marty McDonald's, who was upset because his kite got stuck in a tree. Marty was worried because he had spent so much time flying kites that summer that he forgot about a big test happening the next day. His friend Doc Smith showed up and said he could help by taking Marty back in time to before the kite got stuck. Marty was excited about this solution, but then Doc revealed that his time travel car would not start. According to Doc, the only way to get the car working was for Marty to lick Doc's testicles. The short then showed exactly what that sounds like in graphic animated detail. Doc kept encouraging Marty to continue because it was supposedly making the time machine work. The whole thing was absolutely disgusting and uncomfortable to watch. That was the entire point. Eventually, Doc and Marty went back in time to 1955 when the tree was first being planted. Doc told Marty that the only way to stop the tree from being planted was to lick his testicles again in front of the man planting the tree. Marty was confused because licking Doc's testicles was supposed to fix the time travel car, not stop trees from being planted. But he did it anyway. When the man planting the tree saw this happening, he ran away in panic and somehow disappeared into nothing. Doc and Marty then returned to the present day, where Marty could finally fly his kite. But Marty started to disappear because the man they scared away in 1955 turned out to be his ancestor. To save himself from disappearing, Marty offered to perform an even more explicit act on Doc. This worked and Marty was saved. The short ended there. Dan Harmon later described the short as a bastardization, a pornographic vandalization of Back to the Future. That description was completely accurate. The audience reaction at Channel 101 was wild. People could not believe what they had just watched. Some people were shocked and uncomfortable. Others thought it was hilarious precisely because it was so offensive. The short became a topic of conversation at the festival. Roiland had achieved his goal of creating something that would grab attention. But something unexpected happened during the process of making Doc and Marty. Roiland realized that he actually liked these characters. Even though the short was crude and disgusting, there was something about the voices and the dynamic between the old scientist and the nervous kid that felt interesting to him. He started seeing these characters as more than just a one-time joke. He decided to keep using them in future projects. Roiland ended up making 4 Doc and Marty shorts total. The first one premiered in October 2006. The second short came out in December 2006 and was made to promote the creative freedom that Channel 101 represented. The third short was created to promote a comic book called Scud, the Disposable Assassin, which was written by Rob Schrab. The fourth and final short was made for the Channel 101 Awards ceremony in 2007 and was formatted as a fake Gatorade commercial. With each new short, the Doc and Marty characters evolved a bit. They started to move away from the explicit Back to the Future parody and became more like their own thing. Roiland used these voices in various other Channel 101 projects too. It became an inside joke among his friends. Most people had no idea that these characters originally came from a disgusting parody short. Roiland also developed Rick's signature burp during one of these recordings, which happened completely by accident. After making the Doc and Marty shorts, Roiland continued working in animation. He got voice acting jobs on shows like Adventure Time on Cartoon Network, where he played the Earl of Lemongrab. He also worked on a Disney show called Fish Hooks. Meanwhile, Dan Harmon created and produced a sitcom for NBC called Community. The show became a cult hit and ran for several seasons. Both Roiland and Harmon were building their careers separately, but they stayed friends. In 2012, something important happened. Dan Harmon was fired from Community after the third season because of conflicts with the network. He was suddenly unemployed and looking for new projects. At the same time, Adult Swim was searching for a new hit animated show for their network. They wanted something that could become a primetime success. Adult Swim approached Dan Harmon and asked if he wanted to create an animated series for them. Harmon was initially hesitant. He viewed Adult Swim as a weird experimental network that was very different from the kind of television he usually made. He also had no real experience creating animated shows. His strength was in writing dialogue and character-driven stories, not animation, but Harmon was intrigued by the opportunity. Instead of pitching an idea directly to Adult Swim, he called Justin Roiland and asked if he had any concepts for an animated series. Roiland immediately thought of Doc and Marty. He suggested they develop those characters into a full show. They would rename them and create a completely new universe around them. The characters would become Rick and Morty instead of Doc and Marty. Roiland wanted the show to be 11 minutes long, similar to the format used at Channel 101, but Adult Swim insisted on a half-hour format. Harmon figured out how to make this work. He suggested building a family around the two main characters. An executive at Adult Swim named Nick Weidenfeld came up with the idea that Rick should be Morty's grandfather instead of just a random scientist friend. This family dynamic gave the show much more story potential. Roiland was nervous about the whole process because he had tried to pitch animated shows to Fox before, and all of them got rejected. He had created 3 failed pilots for Fox and was feeling burned out on trying to sell ideas to networks. But Harmon encouraged him to move forward. They wrote the first draft of Rick and Morty in just 6 hours, while sitting in Dan Harmon's empty Community office on the Paramount Pictures lot. Adult Swim loved the pitch and greenlit Rick and Morty for a full season. The show premiered on the 2nd of December 2013. It was an immediate hit with audiences. Critics praised the show for its clever writing, unique storytelling, and surprisingly deep exploration of science fiction concepts. The crude humor from the original Doc and Marty short was mostly gone, replaced with smarter comedy that still pushed boundaries but in different ways. Roiland voiced both Rick and Morty, using the same vocal styles he had developed back in 2006. The show kept some elements from the original short, like Rick's burping and the time travel car that became a spaceship, but everything else was transformed into something new. By the end of the first season, Rick and Morty had become one of Adult Swim's most successful shows ever. The show continued growing in popularity. It developed a massive fan base and became part of mainstream culture. Merchandise sales exploded. The show spawned comic books, video games, and eventually crossed over into other properties. In 2017, an episode of Rick and Morty mentioned a sauce from McDonald's called Szechuan sauce, which led to a viral marketing campaign and widespread media coverage. Rick and Morty became bigger than anyone could have predicted, and it all started with a disgusting animated short that was designed to troll Universal Studios lawyers. Justin Roiland never expected Doc and Marty to become anything more than a one-time joke. But 7 years after that first short premiered at Channel 101, those characters had been transformed into one of the most successful animated franchises in television history. The offensive parody became a cultural phenomenon. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we have the fact that Justin Roiland actually got drunk to record Drunk Rick. Justin Roiland actually got drunk to record Drunk Rick. Rick Sanchez is one of the biggest alcoholics in animated television history. The character drinks constantly throughout every episode of Rick and Morty. He carries a flask with him everywhere he goes. He burps in the middle of sentences because he is always drunk. The show makes it clear that Rick is a high-functioning alcoholic who can still invent incredible technology and travel through dimensions while being completely wasted. But in Season 3, Episode 4, the show needed Rick to be even more drunk than usual. This episode was called Vindicators 3, The Return of Worldender, and it aired on the 13th of August 2017. The plot involved Rick getting so drunk that he blacked out and forgot everything he did. The next day, sober Rick had to deal with the consequences of what his drunk self had done the night before. To make this work, the show needed Justin Roiland to voice an extra drunk version of Rick. And Dan Harmon, who created the show with Roiland, had an unusual idea about how to accomplish this. Dan Harmon encouraged Justin Roiland to actually get drunk in the recording booth while recording his lines. This was not a joke or a publicity stunt. Adult Swim actually filmed the entire recording session and turned it into a promotional video that they released on their Facebook page in May 2017, a few months before the episode aired. The video was called Drunk Rick Method Acting, and it showed exactly what happened when Roiland decided to use real alcohol to get into character. The video opened with Dan Harmon explaining the situation. He said that Rick is a very high-functioning alcoholic, but in episode 304, they needed to see him get especially drunk, so Harmon encouraged Justin to method act. Method acting is when a performer tries to truly experience what their character is experiencing instead of just pretending. In this case, it meant getting actually drunk instead of just acting drunk. The video then showed Justin Roiland in the recording booth with bottles of tequila visible on the table in front of him. Sydney Ryan was the associate producer who worked on Rick and Morty since Season 1. She appeared in the video and explained that the first thing she told Roiland was to not drink tequila. She specifically warned him against tequila because she knew it would make things more complicated. But of course, Roiland went straight for the tequila anyway. Sydney Ryan said that liquor just adds a whole new aspect to Justin. She was clearly not happy about the decision to let him drink during the recording session, but Dan Harmon had already encouraged it. The video showed Roiland taking shots of tequila directly from the bottle while sitting at the microphone. Roiland himself seemed very philosophical about the whole thing. He looked at the camera and asked a legitimate question: how many shots is the right amount of shots for drunk Rick? He said he was on his 4th shot and figured that would get him in the pocket. In the pocket is a term that means being in the right zone or mindset for a performance. Roiland genuinely believed that 4 shots of tequila would help him nail the character. The problem was that 4 shots of tequila also made it nearly impossible for him to actually do his job. The video showed Roiland getting progressively more drunk as the recording session continued. He started slurring his words and going off script. He dropped his pen multiple times. He lost focus constantly. At one point, he stared at the camera and started asking existential questions. Roiland looked directly into the camera while drunk and asked what happens when we all die. He asked the production team if they worry about that at night. These were not scripted lines. This was just a drunk person having the kind of deep philosophical thoughts that drunk people tend to have. The production team tried to keep him focused on the actual lines he was supposed to record, but Roiland kept getting distracted. At another point in the video, Roiland called the production team a bunch of screaming demons. This was said jokingly, but it showed how frustrated he was getting with them trying to keep him on task. He also made comments about hoping the next president would not interfere with his ability to get a gun and kill himself, which was a dark and uncomfortable joke that came from being intoxicated. The team kept telling Roiland that he did not need another shot. They insisted that his performance was good enough and that more alcohol would just make things worse. But Roiland disagreed. At one point in the video, he clearly stated that he was going to need another shot to do the scene properly. The production team yelled no in unison, but Roiland took the shot anyway. Sydney Ryan looked directly at the camera and said this was by far the least productive and messiest record day they had ever had in the entire history of making Rick and Morty. She thanked Dan Harmon sarcastically for encouraging this whole mess. Dan Harmon appeared at the end of the video playing a tiny violin, which was a joke about how he did not care that the recording session was a disaster. The actual episode that came from this recording session was interesting because it showed 2 versions of Rick. There was drunk Rick from the night before, who appeared on video screens that he had pre-recorded. and there was hungover sober Rick dealing with the aftermath. In the episode, Rick and Morty team up with a group of superheroes called the Vindicators to fight a villain named Worldender. But Rick gets extremely drunk the night before the mission. While blackout drunk, Rick single-handedly kills Worldender and his entire army. Then drunk Rick sets up a series of deadly Saw-inspired puzzles for the Vindicators to solve the next day. When sober Rick wakes up in the morning, he has no memory of doing any of this. The episode then follows the Vindicators trying to survive the traps that drunk Rick set up for them. The voice work that Justin Roiland did, while actually drunk, was used for all the pre-recorded video messages that drunk Rick left behind. You can hear the difference in the performance. Drunk Rick sounds genuinely wasted in a way that is different from how Rick normally sounds when he is just regular drunk. The slurring is more pronounced. The rambling is more authentic. The emotional swings feel more real. This is because Roiland was actually experiencing those things while recording the lines. According to the Wikipedia article about the episode, Justin Roiland made himself drunk from 4 or 5 glasses of tequila in order to play a drunken Rick for this episode. Some sources say 4 shots, others say 4 or 5 glasses. Either way, it was enough alcohol to get him legitimately intoxicated. The decision to have Roiland actually get drunk was controversial among fans when the video was released. Some people thought it was funny and showed dedication to the craft. Other people thought it was unprofessional and set a bad example. Adult Swim clearly thought it was good marketing material because they filmed the whole thing and released it as promotional content. The video got millions of views and generated a lot of buzz for Season 3. It became one of the most talked about behind-the-scenes moments in the show's history. Fans even created a petition asking Adult Swim to release the full, unedited footage of the drunk recording session because the promotional video was only a few minutes long. The petition argued that fans deserve to see the complete chaos of what happened that day. The episode itself received positive reviews when it aired. Critics praised the twist of having drunk Rick be the real villain instead of Worldender. The episode currently has an 8.1 rating on IMDb. Jesse Skadine of IGN gave it an 8.5 out of 10 and praised the fun twists and the dynamic between sober Rick and drunk Rick. The episode was watched by 2.66 million viewers when it premiered. It became one of the most memorable episodes of Season 3, partly because of the behind-the-scenes story about how it was made. The drunk method acting became part of the episode's legacy. Whenever fans talk about Vindicators 3, they mention the fact that Roiland was actually drunk while recording it. This was not the first time someone in animation had used real substances to enhance a performance, but it was unusual for the production company to openly film it and use it as marketing. Most shows keep that kind of thing private, but Rick and Morty has always had a reputation for pushing boundaries and doing things differently. The show's fanbase tends to appreciate this kind of behind-the-scenes chaos. It fits with the anarchic spirit of the show itself. Rick is a character who does whatever he wants without caring about consequences, so having the voice actor get drunk to play him seems somehow appropriate to the show's philosophy. Sydney Ryan's role in the video was particularly important because she represented the voice of reason. She was the one person trying to maintain some level of professionalism during the recording session. She warned against tequila specifically, knowing it would be a problem. She tried to convince Roiland he had enough to drink. She documented how unproductive the session became. Her commentary in the video made the whole thing funnier because it showed the contrast between Harmon's chaotic encouragement and Ryan's attempts to keep things under control. Without her reactions, the video would have just been footage of a drunk person rambling. Her perspective as the frustrated producer made it into a story about the creative process going completely off the rails. The video also showed Dan Harmon's approach to making television. He was willing to sacrifice productivity and professionalism for authenticity. He genuinely believed that having Roiland get drunk would result in a better performance. And in some ways, he was right. The drunk Rick voice work in that episode does sound more authentic than it would have if Roiland was just acting drunk while sober. But it came at a cost. The recording session took much longer than normal. Roiland was difficult to work with while intoxicated. The team had to deal with him going off script and asking existential questions and calling them demons. Sidney Ryan said it was the messiest record day they ever had. That means it was worse than any other day in 3 seasons of making one of the most chaotic animated shows on television. The fact that this happened for episode 304 specifically is significant because that episode number became linked to the drunk recording session in fans' minds. Whenever people reference Vindicators 3, they mention episode 304 and the drunk method acting in the same breath. The episode has become inseparable from the story of how it was made. This is relatively rare in animation. Most animated episodes are not remembered for their recording sessions. But this one is an exception because Adult Swim decided to document and publicize the whole thing. They turned a chaotic production day into a marketing opportunity. The video ended with Dan Harmon playing a tiny violin as a joke. This was his response to Sidney Ryan complaining about how difficult the recording session had been. The tiny violin is a universal symbol for mock sympathy. By playing it, Harmon was essentially saying that he did not care about the difficulties his suggestion had created. He thought the end result was worth it. This moment captured the dynamic between the creators and the production staff. Harmon and Roiland are the creative forces who make decisions based on what they think will make the show better. The production staff, like Sidney Ryan, have to deal with the practical consequences of those decisions. When Harmon encouraged Roiland to get drunk, Ryan had to manage a drunk voice actor for an entire recording session. Justin Roiland is no longer involved with Rick and Morty as of 2023 due to legal issues and his dismissal from Adult Swim. But during his time on the show from 2013 to 2022, he voiced both Rick and Morty and was known for his willingness to experiment with different approaches to the performances. The drunk recording session for episode 304 was the most extreme example of this experimental approach. It showed that Roiland was willing to actually alter his mental state to capture a character moment. Most voice actors would simply act drunk. Roiland decided to actually be drunk. This level of commitment to method acting is unusual in voice work, because voice acting is typically seen as a more controlled and technical craft compared to on-camera acting. The promotional video also revealed some interesting details about the show's production process. It showed that Adult Swim films recording sessions, which is not always done for animated shows. It showed that Dan Harmon is present during recording sessions and gives direction. It showed that the show has been working with the same production staff like Sidney Ryan since season 1. These behind-the-scenes glimpses are valuable for fans who want to understand how the show is actually made. The video demystified the voice recording process by showing that it can be messy and chaotic rather than smooth and professional. The legacy of this recording session extends beyond just episode 304. It became part of Rick and Morty's mythology. It contributed to the show's reputation as being willing to do whatever it takes to achieve authenticity. It showed that the creators take the show seriously, even when they are being ridiculous. Getting drunk to voice drunk Rick is both completely absurd and oddly logical at the same time. It is the kind of decision that makes sense within the context of Rick and Morty, but would be considered insane on most other shows. That tension between professionalism and chaos is part of what makes Rick and Morty distinctive as a series. The drunk recording session embodied that tension perfectly, which is why Adult Swim chose to publicize it rather than hide it. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to how the save point remote in the Vat of Acid episode canonically kills countless Mortys. The save point remote in the Vat of Acid episode secretly kills countless Mortys. Rick and Morty arrived at a meeting location to trade some crystals. Before they went inside, Rick explained his escape plan to Morty. He said he had pre-scouted the location and placed a fake vat of acid among the real vats of acid. This fake vat had air hoses inside it so they could breathe, plus a compartment of bones at the bottom. If anything went wrong during the deal, they would jump into the fake acid vat. Rick would release the bones and they would float up to the surface, making it look like they had melted in the acid and died. It was supposed to be a clever escape plan. Morty made a face when Rick explained this. Rick asked what was wrong with the idea and defended it as inventive. Morty did not seem impressed, but they went inside anyway. The crystal deal went bad almost immediately. The buyer revealed that the crystals Morty brought were fake. The buyer also had a fake arm with a gun hidden inside. He threatened to kill them both, saying that even if they killed him, his organization would hunt them down. Rick agreed that they were screwed and suggested they should just die quickly. Then Rick grabbed Morty and jumped into the vat of acid. The buyer and his associates watched in horror as Rick and Morty appeared to dissolve in the acid. There was a pause before the bones floated to the surface. The criminals were traumatized by what they just witnessed. They could not understand why Rick would kill his own grandson by jumping into acid. One of them suggested that maybe Rick knew something about acid that made it painless, since he was a scientist. But another criminal pointed out that there was a 5-second pause before the bones came up, which meant Rick and Morty experienced 5 seconds of unparalleled torture before they died. The criminals were so disturbed by what they saw that they decided to stay in the building and talk about it. They said they would stay as long as they needed to process what happened. The boss told long stories while his crew pretended to listen. Eventually, they decided they were ready to leave. Before going, they realized they should dispose of the body by dropping it into a different vat of acid. One criminal asked if acid loses its power after dissolving something. Another suggested they should test it by grabbing a rat-like creature and throwing it in. But a third criminal said they should use a ladle to scoop some acid and test it in an analyzer instead of using a rat. One of the criminals accidentally got acid on himself while testing it, proving the acid was still very acidic. They agreed to drop the body in. But when they tried to grab what they thought was a body, Rick suddenly burst out of the fake acid vat, screaming at them. The criminals were shocked to see Rick alive. Morty climbed out after him, also yelling. Rick was furious that his plan got ruined because the criminals spent too much time talking and almost discovered the truth about the fake acid vat. Morty was angry too, but for different reasons. He told Rick to just admit the acid vat was a bad idea. Rick defended himself, saying it was not a bad idea and that Morty had ruined it by not believing in it from the start. They started arguing in front of the confused criminals. Morty brought up other times Rick had done things without him, like when Rick turned himself into a pickle. He also made fun of Rick for the dragon episode and said Rick was just trying to copy Game of Thrones. Rick shot back by calling Morty's insults outdated and telling him to save them for his English homework. Rick said there is no such thing as a bad idea, only bad execution. Morty disagreed and said Rick constantly rejected all of his ideas without even considering them. Rick asked for an example. Morty mentioned a helicopter lawn chair, but Rick dismissed it as something Morty just saw on TV. Then Morty brought up his video game-style place-saving device. This was an idea for a machine that would let you save your place in real life like you can save your progress in a video game. If something went wrong, you could go back to your save point and try again. Rick immediately dismissed this idea too. He said he had seen that same concept on the show Futurama. Morty argued that Rick does not do anything unless someone else invented it first. Rick clarified that he does not do time travel. Morty insisted his idea was not time travel, it was just saving a place in time. Rick explained that creating such a device would require an enormous amount of work. Morty saw this as Rick admitting he could not do it. Rick insisted he could do anything, but that Morty's idea simply was not worth doing. Morty kept pushing, saying Rick could not do it. Rick recognized this as reverse psychology, which he said was invented by Bugs Bunny long before modern tactics. But Morty's challenge worked anyway. Rick got angry and said there was nothing he could not do. The argument escalated until Rick finally shouted that he would build the device just to prove Morty wrong. This happened at 3 in the morning when Rick called Morty down to the garage. When Morty arrived, Rick acted very different. He said Morty was right and that he had failed. Rick claimed he could not make the device and was ashamed of himself. He apologized for being aggressive about rejecting Morty's ideas. He even admitted that maybe the fake acid vat was evidence that he had lost his abilities as an inventor. Morty felt bad and started apologizing too. He said they just needed to find better ways to communicate. Rick continued acting sad and defeated, talking about how Morty's criticism had opened his eyes. Then suddenly, Rick's tone changed completely. He revealed that he had successfully built the device and was just messing with Morty. Rick was extremely proud of himself for completing what he called an impossible invention. He showed Morty a small remote control. This was the save point device that Morty had suggested. Rick explained that Morty could use the device to go have fun. Morty was amazed and grateful. He thanked Rick and called him the best grandpa ever. Rick said that was all he ever wanted to hear. Morty took the remote and immediately started using it. The device had a button that would save his current place in reality. Then if anything went wrong, or if Morty just wanted to redo something, he could press another button to return to that saved moment. Morty started small by using it at school. His math teacher had just returned from a long absence and was explaining that he had attended a Renaissance fair, fallen in love with a younger woman who juggled hand axes, and traveled around the country with her before getting his heart broken. The teacher asked who wanted to do some math. Morty volunteered and walked to the front of the class. He pulled down his pants and exposed himself to everyone. The students screamed in horror. The teacher was traumatized. But then Morty pressed the reset button on his remote. Suddenly, he was back in his seat before any of that happened. The teacher asked again who wanted to do some math. This time, Morty just answered normally and the teacher praised him. Morty realized the device worked perfectly. He could do anything without consequences. He started using the device constantly. He did reckless stunts. He insulted people. He told off a friend named Heroin Keith. He got into dangerous situations with criminals and police. He lived an increasingly wild lifestyle because he knew he could always reset if things went wrong. The device gave him complete freedom to experiment with life without facing any real consequences for his actions. Morty also used the device to improve his relationship with Jessica, the girl he liked at school. In one timeline, Jessica tried to talk to Morty and apologize for being cold to him before. But Morty acted dismissive and walked away. Then he reset and tried a different approach. Over many resets, Morty figured out the perfect things to say to Jessica. He learned how to act confident and mysterious. Jessica started noticing that Morty seemed different, like he had finally found himself. She said she liked who he had become. Morty told her he liked himself too. Jessica said she was looking forward to seeing more of this new Morty. She told him she would see him tomorrow. Morty agreed and felt great about how things were going. He had essentially hacked his relationship with Jessica by trying different approaches until he found what worked. After using the device extensively, Morty started feeling different about it. He went to talk to Rick in the garage. Morty said that the device had been fun at first. He had definitely enjoyed sowing his wild oats and living without consequences. But then he started thinking about what it all meant. He wondered what he was living for and what he was building toward. If he was always looking backward to his save points, he could never look forward to the future. Morty said he had realized that people are who they are because of consequences. You cannot live without consequences. He asked Rick if he understood what he was saying. Rick said it was a beautiful thought. But then Rick revealed something horrible. He said there definitely were consequences to everything Morty had done. Morty was confused and asked what Rick meant. Rick explained that Morty actually did all of those things. They all really happened. Morty insisted that the remote let him respawn at his save point, which meant he could redo things. Rick said it was not a redo. Morty had just done everything over and over again. Morty asked what Rick was saying. Rick revealed the truth about how the device actually worked. He explained that he does not respect time travel. He said if the movie Ant-Man and the Wasp could do time travel, then he was not interested in doing it. The device did not actually let Morty save his place and go back in time. Instead, it worked by isolating a moment in time and splitting Morty's probable selves. Then it would shunt Morty into a near-duplicate reality that was equally probable. The device transported Morty into this new reality at the moment it diverged from his original timeline. Rick said time crystals were difficult to work with, but the technology was pretty impressive overall. The only problem was that there was already a Morty living in each of these probable dimensions. Rick had to solve for that. He revealed that every time Morty pressed the reset button, the device teleported him into an alternate reality. but that reality already had its own Morty living in it. So the device killed that alternate Morty and incinerated his body. Then it placed the dimensional traveler Morty into that dead Morty's place. Rick compared it to the movie The Prestige, where a magician appears to teleport but actually creates a duplicate of himself and kills the original. Rick said that every single time Morty reset to smell Jessica's hair or relive a satisfying moment, that was another Morty he had murdered. Rick called Morty a greedy junkie. Morty was devastated when he understood what he had done. He asked about specific times he had used the device. Rick confirmed that especially during those times, Morty had killed other versions of himself. Rick told Morty to take in what he was feeling. This was supposed to be a lesson. Morty asked why Rick would do this to him. Rick said his hands were clean because he gave Morty a choice. At the very beginning, Rick offered to explain in great scientific detail exactly how the device worked, or Morty could just go have fun without hearing the explanation. Rick asked if Morty had fun. Morty realized this was revenge for criticizing the acid vat. Rick said no, it was too late for apologies. What was done, but Rick said it could end. The original split when Morty first used the device was still time-stamped in the system. Rick could make it so all those alternate Mortys never existed at all. He could make them purely theoretical rather than real. Morty desperately asked what he should do. Rick said Morty had clearly done enough already. Morty begged Rick to tell him how to save all those Mortys he had killed. Rick said Morty would have to live with the consequences. Those things happened somewhere in the multiverse, but Rick could merge the probable realities so that only one Morty did all of those actions. Just one Morty would carry the memory and guilt of everything. Morty told Rick to just do it. Rick said he would sync everything up and get Morty back to his home dimension. Morty suddenly realized something and asked if Rick was even his Rick. Rick said no, he was not. Morty asked how this Rick knew about the acid vat plan. Rick casually explained that every Rick has a fake acid vat. It was apparently a common escape plan across all dimensions. Rick said they had invented some honesty that day. Morty said he did not deserve what was happening to him. He insisted he was just having fun. Rick compared Morty to Jeffrey Dahmer, the serial killer. Then Rick said it was time for Morty to pay for what he had done. Suddenly, there was loud banging and shouting outside. Multiple groups of people were surrounding the house, demanding that Morty Smith come out with his hands up. They called him sick and said they were fine with just shooting him if he wanted to commit suicide by cop. Morty asked what was happening. Rick looked out the window and saw a massive crowd. There was a SWAT team, drug dealers, activists from various movements, the ACLU, the AARP, the NAACP, people from Gamergate, and even Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor. All of these people were there because of crimes and offenses that Morty had committed in different realities before resetting. But now that all the realities had been merged into one, all of those victims remembered what Morty had done to them. Morty apologized and asked what he should do. Rick said he was stumped, and there seemed to be no way out of the situation. Then Rick suggested there might be one option, though he acted reluctant to say it. Rick brought up the acid vat. Morty realized what Rick was suggesting. Rick forced Morty to admit the vat was good. Rick made Morty kiss the vat. Some of the people outside were watching and told Morty not to go into the vat. They could see it appeared to be full of acid. Morty's parents begged him to step back from the vat. His mother said the acid would melt him completely and leave only his bones. Morty shouted that he was going in the vat anyway. He jumped into the acid. His parents screamed that they blamed themselves for not stopping him. Everyone watched as bones floated to the surface of the vat. The crowd agreed that all debts were paid now that Morty was dead. One person questioned if they bore some responsibility for driving a young man to melt himself in acid. Another person quoted Shakespeare's The Merchant of Venice about justice and mercy. The crowd started getting philosophical about vengeance and justice. But someone interrupted and said a kid just died and everyone should go home and hug their loved ones. Then one person in the crowd questioned whether it was really acid. He suggested maybe Rick just had bones in there and it was not actually acid at all. Rick offered to let the person test it with a ladle. The person said he was not an idiot and brought his own ladle. He reached into the vat and immediately started screaming in agony. But then his screaming changed to laughter. He revealed that he was acid-proof. He started celebrating and taunting the crowd, saying he was going to be rich now that he knew he had this power. He showed everyone his bare backside and told them to take a good look. Rick commented that it seemed like that guy had other issues going on beyond just the current situation. Rick told Morty they should go home now. Morty was confused and asked if this was not their home reality. Rick revealed that no, this was not their actual home dimension. Rick explained that he would not waste their real home reality just to teach Morty a lesson, but Rick said he was going to miss this dimension. In this reality, Johnny Carson was still alive and hosting his talk show. The September 11 attacks never happened, and Rocky Road ice cream had peanut butter instead of marshmallows. Morty was horrified by this last detail. He said the marshmallows were the best part of Rocky Road ice cream. The episode ended by showing Johnny Carson's talk show in that dimension. Carson introduced a guest who gave very little information about himself, except that he was impervious to acid. The guest was the same man from earlier, who discovered he was acid-proof. He came on stage ready to prove his power. Carson confirmed the man was sure about this. The man told Carson to hoist him up and drop him into a vat of acid. Carson dropped him in, and the man started screaming in horrible pain. He begged someone to kill him. The acid was clearly melting him, revealing he was not actually acid-proof at all. His earlier survival was just a coincidence or temporary effect that did not last. He suffered a terrible death on live television while Rick and Morty escaped to their real home dimension. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to the fact that Night Family turns the entire Smith family into their own horror movie monsters. Night Family turns the Smiths into their own horror movie monsters. Rick arrived home one morning and showed off his stomach to the family. He had developed visible abs overnight. Summer asked what was going on with him the night before because she had tried talking to him and he acted like she was not there. Rick explained that it was not technically him. It was his night person. He said he had been having his night person do crunches while he slept. A night person is created by a device called a somnambulator that Rick obtained while passing through a system called Gooby Jube the previous week. Rick said it was the best investment he ever made. Before going to bed, Rick types a list of tasks he wants to get done. Then the somnambulator programs his unconscious body to complete those tasks while he sleeps. His unconscious body becomes his night person. Rick said he was getting so much done this way. Jerry asked if his night person could get him abs like Rick had. Morty said he wanted his night person to learn Spanish so he could pass a test the following week. Rick immediately said no one gets a night person except him. He said the technology was too advanced for them. He started to call them something but stopped. Summer told him to go ahead and say it. Rick pretended he did not know what she was talking about. Then Rick gave up and said fine. Everybody could get a night person. He told them to stick out their fingers because the device needed a blood sample. Jerry asked if he could just give it Beth's credit card number instead of blood. Rick explained this was not a food delivery service. The somnambulator needed their DNA profile to send commands to their subconscious minds. Jerry said the device could poke all the fingers he had if he got abs like Rick. Morty said he was going to learn trumpet. Summer prepared herself and asked someone to catch her if she fainted. The family started using their night people that night. The next morning, things had changed significantly. Morty greeted his mother in Spanish. Beth asked how her honor student was doing. Morty said all the kids at school thought he should run for class president. Jerry walked in and asked Summer if she wanted to see something. He asked her to drop a bowling ball on his abs. Summer said hell yes, because she was only human. Jerry told her to watch. Then Rick and Morty announced they were about to go live with their podcast. Beth asked where they were going. Rick explained that he and Morty had started a podcast called Fabsolutely Abulous. It was an hour of fun content centered around abs. They were hoping to get Nancy Pelosi on the show the following week so they could drop her on their abs. Jerry announced he had a new pen pal. When no one reacted, he clarified that he was the one with the pen pal. Summer asked about it. Jerry explained that Night Jerry and Day Jerry wrote letters to each other and it was super fun. He read some examples saying they both liked the musician Tori Amos and hoped each other liked their new pajamas. One letter asked what the sun was. Beth told Jerry this was not how he was supposed to use a night person. Jerry said she and Rick were being negative. He said to wait until Night Jerry read about their attitude. Then Jerry asked who wanted cake. Rick and Morty were doing a sponsored advertisement during their podcast. Morty mentioned abs were cool. Rick agreed but said the undergarments were important too. Morty brought up boxer shorts they got from a company called Boxer Lobster. Rick said Boxer Lobster boxers felt like warm butter. They came in different styles, including neon, plaid, and orange. Rick even had a pair with a character from a movie printed on them. Morty identified the character as Chewbacca. Rick encouraged people to upgrade to Boxer Lobster boxers. Then Rick noticed the sponsor wanted him to say his catchphrase at the end. Rick refused and said they were not prostitutes. Beth called them in for dinner. Rick joked about his abs being hot. Then Jerry mentioned that Night Jerry said Night Summer would appreciate it if everybody rinsed off their plates after eating. Rick asked what Jerry was talking about. Jerry explained that rinsing the food debris off after eating makes it easier to clean up later. Rick said their job was not to make the night people's chores easier. Jerry said it was a reasonable request that only took 2 seconds. Rick insisted the night people existed only to do tasks the day people did not want to do. Rick declared the request was denied and would stay denied forever. The next morning, Rick woke up and asked where the dishes were. Summer told him they were in another room. The Night family had broken all their dishes. Rick asked what they were supposed to eat off now. Jerry appeared holding alien dishes and said they would eat off these. He explained the Night family left them as replacements. Rick said Jerry spent a lot of energy just to avoid giving the Night family what they wanted. Rick told Jerry to tell his boyfriend to perform an inappropriate act and said good luck breaking the super strong alien dishes. Jerry said he would pass along the message, but Night Jerry would not like it. That night, while they slept, their night people became more aggressive. The Night family started chanting at Rick to rinse his dishes. They said if he refused to rinse, the dried food made cleaning harder. Rick found himself unable to move. He asked who locked his implants. Night Morty revealed that Night Jerry told him to do it after Rick fell asleep. Night Morty explained that Night You is not in charge, Night I am. Rick said he did not care and was not going to rinse anything. He asked what Night Morty was doing. Night Morty said if Rick refused to clean his dishes, then Night Morty would have to do it for him. Night Morty forced Rick to eat something disgusting as punishment. Night Morty said he had always been inside Rick's grandchild's mind waiting to come out. The machine allowed Night Morty to steal the night, and soon he would seize the day. Rick called out for help using religious language. He told someone it was awful. Rick was extremely upset about being force-fed by Night Morty. Summer did not understand why Rick was angry at her. Rick explained he had just been force-fed excrement by her night person. Additionally, Night Rick had convinced Night Morty to lock Rick out of his technology. Summer called Rick down because there had been a significant escalation. The Night family had stripped the house during the night. Everything was gone, including the somnambulator device. They had locked the Day family out of the garage. Summer said she had a bad feeling about the situation. Rick yelled at Summer asking if she was happy now. Summer insisted she had not done anything and was trapped in the situation too. Rick said he was glad because he had a plan to beat Night Summer. He told Summer she was going undercover. Rick was making some kind of device on the living room carpet. Jerry asked if Rick had to make messy science equipment on the carpet. Rick said he had no choice because Night Summer had Night Rick take away his technology. He had to improvise. Rick explained that there are different levels of a stress hormone called cortisol in the bloodstream when someone is asleep versus awake. The interface he was building only worked off his awake saliva samples. He created a laser cage that no one asleep would be able to turn off until he won the conflict. Jerry asked where Summer was. Rick told him to never mind that and ordered everyone to get to bed. Summer appeared, wearing an uncomfortable suit. She said it itched and was very uncomfortable. Rick said that was the entire point. He called it a sleep deprivation suit designed to keep her awake until morning. Jerry asked if the Night family would be suspicious seeing Night Summer covered in equipment. Rick said they would not question her because Night Summer was the leader of the Night family for some unexplained reason. Rick told Summer that when the Night family activated, she should blend in and make them think she was Night Summer. If she started falling asleep, she should suck on a tube. Summer asked what was in it. Rick said it was a mixture of Mountain Dew and Dayquil. He said kids in Southern Europe called it Dewquil. Summer said it smelled disgusting. Rick agreed it was gross. Rick explained that once Summer found the somnambulator, she should use a deactivator puck. She needed to stick it on the somnambulator, and when the puck activated, it would destroy the device's circuits. Rick emphasized she needed to stay awake all night and meet him back at sunrise. When Night Summer activated, the other Night people asked why she was wearing that suit. She told them they were not clothing experts. They agreed that was fair, and she made a good point. Night Summer told them to get back to work because she ruled the night. They all obeyed her commands. Rick woke up the next morning to Summer shouting at him. He asked if she found the device. Summer said definitely. She explained that the Night family had been improving the somnambulator so they could extend its range beyond the house. But Summer defeated them by putting the deactivator on the device. Rick woke everyone up and announced that Summer fried the somnambulator and the nightmare was over. Jerry said goodbye to his pen pal. The family decided to go to a restaurant for pancakes. Rick said brunch was on him. He mentioned that for a second, he thought Night Summer was going to win. He said that version of Summer was the absolute worst. Summer responded that Rick's opinion meant very little to her. Summer revealed she was actually Night Summer. She had been awake the whole time and tricked them. Rick asked if she thought she could stop him with the puck device. Night Summer told everyone to halt. Rick told everyone to get behind his abs for protection. Night Summer told them not to move because they were definitely surrounded. She said they were the slaves now. If they had any doubt, she suggested they sleep on it. Rick realized Summer was Night Summer. Jerry thanked him for pointing out the obvious. The Night family forced the Day family to work as slaves. They made them do hard labor. Night Summer gave speeches, saying it was natural for Day to serve Night. She said night existed long before day. She pointed out that half of all time is nighttime. Jerry was forced to do many crunches. He begged for them to stop because he hated exercise. Night Summer told him to be silent and crunch harder. Rick said they had to escape the range of the somnambulator. Beth asked if they even knew how far that range was. Rick admitted they might be in serious trouble this time. Night Summer announced it was time to report to sleep pods for rest period. Suddenly, Night Jerry appeared and told the Day family he was a friend of Day Jerry. He told them to come with him. The family asked how this was possible. Night Jerry said to hurry because the proxy drones would come back online soon. Jerry thanked Night Jerry. Night Jerry said anything to help Day Jerry's family because Day Jerry was a very special person. Rick killed Night Jerry immediately. Beth said nice work getting their Jerry back. Rick said that was totally why he did it. Rick told everyone to get in his car. Morty started to go, but Rick yelled at him to wait. Rick was having trouble with his car. Someone named Gene taunted him about it. Rick told Gene this was not a good time. Robot guards appeared and said the Day people were restricted from the outside world. They ordered everyone to halt. Rick told everyone to hold on. Beth asked where they were going. Rick said to the airport. They had to get as far away as possible from the somnambulator before they fell asleep. Morty asked about Summer. He said they could not leave her behind. Rick said Summer was not Morty's sister anymore and to consider her dead. Rick insulted Summer as they drove away. Beth told Rick he needed to lose the robots chasing them. Rick said he thought they lost the robots, but then more robots appeared. Rick said they lost Morty during the chase. Beth told him to watch out. One robot was destroyed. A night person told everyone to stop or they would shoot everyone. Rick told Beth to take the wheel. She said, as you wish. Rick fought with the night person. The night person said Rick was going the wrong way. Rick told the night person to be silent. Morty said he knew he was choking Rick. Beth's daughter asked what was happening. Beth told her to help stop Beth. Beth told someone to look out. Beth called Jerry useless. Someone asked for the gun. There was confusion about who should drive. The Night family was trying to make them go back home. Someone said they had to turn around. Beth asked why Jean should even bother. Someone said good job and they were back on course. Someone said they almost did not make it. Night Summer ordered the day people to go to bed. A night person tried to help but got confused about whose side they were on. People apologized for the rough day. Night Summer told the day people to come on and jump. Someone asked why they should jump when they were already in a functional car. Rick asked if everyone was awake. People confirmed they were now awake and asked what was happening. Rick said it looked like they were going to make it. Night Summer said goodnight to the slaves. Rick said an expletive. Someone said to take that, and there was fighting. Rick told people to hold someone down. Rick said no repeatedly. Someone told Rick to stop and said they were all the same people. They suggested there must be some agreement to stop the awful conflict. Night Summer asked what kind of agreement. Night Summer said she would consider a truce if the day people would rinse their dishes. Someone said fine. Others agreed it seemed fair. Someone said they could end everything right now if Rick agreed to rinse dishes. Someone asked what Rick said. Someone suggested going home and asked if that was okay. Rick called that a great idea. Later, someone was on the phone explaining that an account was frozen due to unpaid fees and overdue charges. The person said this normally would have been handled by day people, but they recently freed themselves from nighttime control. Someone told their spouse they had 30 more calls to make. Someone said the bank took back their car. Someone was locked out of their social media account and did not know their password. Someone explained they spent all the day people's money on vacations, renting concert halls, and entertainment subscriptions. They were broke now. Someone said there was more work to running things during the day than they thought. Someone said they had a device that would solve all their problems. Someone asked how long they had been asleep. Someone said it could not be that long. Then someone said no and mentioned they discontinued the Choco Taco. The Choco Taco was an ice cream product. The fact that it had been discontinued meant significant time had passed while they were asleep under the Knight family's control. The episode ended with this realization that the Knight family had kept them asleep for so long that real-world changes had occurred, specifically the discontinuation of a popular frozen dessert product. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to how That's Amorte is built on a suicide-based spaghetti economy. Rick made spaghetti for the family on a Thursday night. Everyone loved it. Summer said she was extremely impressed. Rick offered more sauce and asked if anyone wanted seconds or thirds. Jerry mentioned he had bombed a job interview, but the food made him feel better. Beth commented on how tender the noodles were. The family talked about how nice it was to spend time together. Rick said they had as much spaghetti as anyone could eat. Then Morty asked Rick what the secret ingredient was. Rick seemed annoyed by the question. Morty realized it was probably a person. He asked why it could not just be normal spaghetti. Rick explained as simply as possible that on a certain planet, people who kill themselves turn into spaghetti. Morty was confused. Rick said Morty was a visual learner and told him to follow along. Rick took Morty to a morgue. A staff member told Rick he was not supposed to bring patients. Rick lied and said the alien boy had space cancer and his dying wish was to see dead people so he could feel superior. The staff member said that was all Rick needed to say. Rick showed Morty different bodies. One was murdered, one died in a car crash, and one was a suicide. Morty asked what the smell was. Rick told him he knew exactly what it was. Rick opened the body and revealed spaghetti inside. Morty told him not to do that. Rick said Morty had been eating it for weeks every spaghetti night. Rick tried to feed Morty some right there. Morty said it was gross. Rick insisted. Morty asked why and how this happened. Rick explained their cortisol increases the starch content in their blood, changing their intestines into one long spaghetti noodle. The surrounding tissues become a sauce, but it takes a lot of cortisol, like a suicidal amount. Rick said it was almost better cold. Morty said not to be a hipster about it. A morgue worker asked if they were eating a corpse. Morty said it was okay because it was spaghetti. Rick pointed out the workers did not know what spaghetti was. The worker said she was calling the police. Rick used a device on her before she could. The worker suddenly asked where she was. Rick said in a morgue eating bodies. She asked what they were doing. Rick kept using the device to erase her memory. She kept asking questions about basic things. Rick and Morty left. Rick apologized for the embarrassing situation, but said Morty now understood. It was the best spaghetti in the galaxy and completely guilt-free. Morty said he wanted to know their names. Rick asked who he meant. Morty said the people they had been eating every spaghetti night. He wanted to know if Rick even knew their names. Rick refused to give the names of the spaghetti people. He said Morty had found his line, and he found that ghoulish. Morty threatened to tell his mom and end spaghetti night if Rick did not provide names. Rick asked where his memory erasing device was. Morty demanded the names. Rick asked if knowing the names would be enough, and this would be done. Morty confirmed that was all he wanted. Rick asked if Morty would not get overwhelmed with guilt and demand to go to their funeral. Morty promised just the names, and then he was done. Rick said he hated Morty. Morty said he just wanted to pay his respects. Rick said the only reason Morty was still alive was because he did not turn delicious when he died. At the funeral, a speaker asked if anyone wanted to say words about Lawrence or have another moment of silence. Rick made a comment about why Lawrence killed himself. Then Morty stood up. He said he wanted to be honest about something. After Lawrence died, they ate him. Morty clarified they were not werewolves. He explained they came from a planet where when people kill themselves, they turn into what his planet considers food, which is spaghetti. It brought them together. Morty said it felt wrong not having anyone know that. He added that Lawrence was delicious and hoped that helped make things right. Rick said that should provide closure for everyone. Back at home, the family processed what they learned. They confirmed they had been eating people. Jerry said the bodies were so spaghetti-like. Beth said it would be hard to get out of their minds, which is why Rick kept them in the dark. Summer blamed Morty for ruining spaghetti night. Morty pointed out it was people. Beth agreed it was disgusting and not cool to lie about, but she also said it was not cool for Morty to tattle. Jerry said they were delicious. Summer asked why they could not keep eating them. Beth said they could not now because of Morty. Jerry apologized and said that was terrible parenting. He said Morty did the technically right thing, and they were happy to be better informed. Beth mentioned octopus and joked about joining a different political group. The family said goodnight to Morty as he went to his room. Later, Morty received a message. It said he was invited to the planet, which was called 41 Kepler b, but Morty knew it as Spaghetti Planet. The message said he was not in trouble. They just wanted to talk. The president of the planet greeted Morty. He said he saw the video from the funeral. Morty apologized, but the president said not to be sorry. It was quite a revelation. The president asked Morty to show them something. He presented the spaghetti of a person who took their own life. The person had consented to be eaten. Morty tried it and said it was amazing as always. The president asked if Morty considered himself a typical person from Earth. Morty explained that on Earth it was considered inferior to be typical, so everyone claimed to be special and different, but they definitely all liked spaghetti. The president noted that all 8 billion Earth people liked it. He asked if Morty would be interested in being an ambassador, a liaison between their worlds. Morty started to object, saying he went to the funeral because he felt bad about not having permission. The president told someone to show Morty something. A woman appeared on screen and introduced herself as Tanya Radcliffe. She said she had been living in pain for years and lost all her loved ones. When doctors told her she could have the right to die if she agreed to be dinner for an alien boy, she said she hoped she was delicious. Morty was impressed. The president asked if that made it taste better. Morty said it made it go down easier. The president said he liked that response. Maybe it was time to allow some people the right to die and be delicious. He told Morty to feel free to finish eating Tanya because it was what she wanted. Morty said no, he was good. He thanked Tanya for being tasty. Then he asked if he could take her to go. At the next spaghetti night, the family was excited about the ethical spaghetti. Jerry said he was fine before too. They asked where their dad was and why he kept missing spaghetti night. Beth suggested Jerry was upset because Morty took the moral high ground and got them delicious spaghetti without lies. They started to cheer for not having Rick there when Rick suddenly appeared. Rick showed them something. It was a product called Mortio's Suicide Spaghetti that claimed to be 100% ethical single-origin pasta. Beth said, "Oh dear God." Rick guessed that Morty went back to the planet, gave thoughtful insight to their leader, and now they were selling their dead at every store. Morty admitted he did, but did not tell them to do this. Summer asked if this was people or not people, because she needed to know how upset to pretend to be. Rick identified the spaghetti as someone named Roger. A video played of Roger Wayne Martyr introducing himself as a serial killer and cannibal who was now killing himself to be food. Summer confirmed it was people. Beth said, on the bright side, this could be seen as a nice ending to a story about telling the truth. Rick asked if she wanted to see that ending. Rick showed them the planet covered in cans of spaghetti selling out to neighboring planets. Rick asked if Morty wanted to see how ethical it was. The planet looked terrible. Rick said Morty happened all over those billboards. Morty saw a bridge that people called the most scenic jump. There used to be safety rails, but they melted them down for giant spaghetti strainers. Rick offered to turn on the radio. Morty guessed it would all be sad music. Rick said no, it was all morning radio show hosts just talking with no songs, and the television was all reality shows but not good ones. Rick said it was depressing, which was definitely what they were going for. He showed that they dyed their son gray. Rick said that was not easy, and he was kind of impressed. All of it was thanks to Morty. Morty said he was a murderer. Rick corrected him and said what Morty did was much more indirect. They met with the president. Rick mentioned concerns, but the president said to look around. With money from intergalactic spaghetti trade, they decreased their debt and were making money. They had clean energy. Rick pointed out there was a pause where the president should have mentioned mental health care. The president admitted they had to manipulate things a little, but if they stopped, the supply chain would collapse and kill the global economy. Many people would suffer then. Rick asked if this was a tough problem. He asked if they could fix it. Then Rick clarified that Morty wanted Rick to fix it. Morty asked for a moment alone with Rick. Morty said yes, he wanted Rick to fix it. None of this would have happened if Rick had been honest about the spaghetti. Rick said he lied to protect Morty. Morty told the truth to hurt Rick. Rick said he could not travel the galaxy with Morty if every time they came near a messed up system, Morty jumped into its problems and hurt himself. Morty promised to stop. Rick asked what he said. Morty said if Rick helped him, he promised to never look under the curtain at a Rick thing to figure out what was bad about it ever again. Rick said Morty could never say no to him. Morty asked if Rick was like a cult leader. Rick said for 2 weeks. Morty agreed. Rick said his grandson kissed up to him, so he was in. Rick asked what they needed to do. Morty said they just needed to figure out something besides people to put in the cans. Someone pointed out that people are the spaghetti. Morty asked what if they were not? The president said he was listening. Morty suggested making something like a person. He mentioned Rick always did clones. Rick asked what Morty was suggesting. A sped-up lifespan and indoctrination program where they limit exposure to the world and convince them becoming spaghetti is their destiny? A clone appeared, saying it would not be delicious for them and that it loved someone. Rick said that was a speedrun of a certain story. Morty complained about spoilers. Rick said all clone stories turn out the same way. Someone asked if they were back to regular people with regular suicides. Morty said no. Hold on. Maybe they could make them less like people. Rick asked how much of a person they had to become spaghetti. Rick said gray areas were his specialty. He showed subject 1 with no frontal lobe and no empathy centers. Unfortunately, to that being, there was no difference between life and death, so no spaghetti. Then Rick described another one in horrible, unimaginable pain from birth. Morty objected. Rick said he did not even bother making it because he knew Morty would object, even though ending its life would be a favor. Rick told Morty he might want to examine an ethical dilemma at some point. Rick showed the last one. He kept the brainstem and internal motor functions, but essentially just a headless, boneless torso. Someone asked if there was spaghetti inside. Rick said theoretically yes. The problem was something he did not finish saying. Morty tried to communicate something through gestures. Rick could not understand and told Morty to just spell it out. Morty suggested giving them a claw-like hand so they could stab themselves to death. Rick said that was all he needed to say. The president said this was quite a solution they cooked up. Someone confirmed it was spaghetti technically. The president said, good enough. They needed to fill 100,000 cans by the weekend. Later, there were protests. People chanted about torso rights. Others complained the new spaghetti was bad and they wanted authentic spaghetti. Someone was about to blow himself up. Rick asked if he was really going to do that. The person said yes, but Rick could do it if he wanted. Rick said the person clearly had the morally superior position, so he should go ahead. The person accused Rick of just wanting him to kill himself so Rick could eat the spaghetti. They exchanged insults. Rick asked how long a society takes to collapse. He said they would find out. Someone asked what the holdup was because an entire planet was waiting on delivery. Workers said they were out of spaghetti. Someone said they should go down and make some. A crowd chanted for people to kill themselves. The president said to divert half the armed patrols to civil unrest and the other half to planetary defense. Take every action necessary to restore order. Rick noted there still was not much diverting towards mental health care. The president said the brainstorming was over and called them names. He said they had helped enough. Someone said they owed so much spaghetti to so many planets that they would all have to kill themselves. Morty told them to slow down. He asked if Rick could synthesize anything he got a sample of. Could they not try that? Rick asked if there was anyone else left who might want to kill themselves. The president said there was one person, but good luck. They described someone with 2 months to live who was bedridden in terrible pain. Rick asked why he had not done it yet. They went to see the person who cursed at them and called them Spaghetti Child. Rick asked what the issue was. The person said he was in pain and wished he could die, but he would not feed their sick system of profit. Integrity meant living with pain. Rick asked what if this would end the spaghetti trade forever. The person asked what Rick meant. Rick said he would explain on the way. Morty asked if they just had a chamber ready to go. Rick said it was just a place. Rick told everyone to stop. He said he had a solution to get them all spaghetti. They would do this one last time. This guy would do it and Rick would synthesize it afterward. Rick compared it to a historic first flight. He said the person named Fred should think about his life. The machine would put it on screen for everyone to see. When ready, Fred should press the button. Someone asked if this would work. Rick said to trust him. Then Fred pressed the button and a song played while images of his life appeared on screen. The song was about flying and living forever and seeing things others would not see. When it finished, Rick said, "Bon appetit." Someone said a profanity. The president said he could speak for his people and they had enough spaghetti. Rick asked if the person did what Rick thought. Rick could not change everyone's taste, but he could make it distasteful. It was not the death, it was the complexity of life. Someone asked what the point was. Rick said if they were asking whether this was a story about right and wrong, he did not care. Someone asked what they should do. Rick said cells consume. Life itself is wrong, which means death is right. But you cannot side with that, so you live even when it means eating. And Fred really did it well. At the next family dinner, Summer asked where the spaghetti was. Morty told her to perform an inappropriate act. Summer asked what was wrong with Salisbury steaks and suggested they try them. Rick said the Salisbury steak was the best he ever had. Summer asked if it was actually Salisbury steak. Rick asked if she wanted to know or not. Summer said no thanks. Rick said just so she knew, it was really bad. Summer said whatever. Rick said seriously, he was not kidding. He would not tell them but needed them to know the truth was horrible, so if they found out by accident, they could not blame him. Morty said that was a deal. Rick said, honestly, if they knew they might kill themselves, and that was the last thing he would say forever. The family said good. Then someone asked if that was where vacuum cleaner bags came from. Someone else said, oh my god. The episode ended there. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we have the fact that Rick and Morty is one of the most heavily censored shows on television, but completely uncensored on discs and streaming releases. The show is heavily censored on TV, but uncensored on discs and streaming. Rick and Morty is an animated science fiction comedy series that airs on Adult Swim, which is the nighttime programming block on Cartoon Network. The show was created by Justin Roiland and Dan Harmon and first premiered on the 2nd of December 2013. The series follows the adventures of Rick Sanchez, a cynical mad scientist, and his nervous grandson Morty Smith as they travel through different dimensions and have wild adventures. The show is known for its dark humor, science fiction elements, and use of strong language. However, there is a significant difference between how the show appears on television versus how it appears on physical media like DVD and Blu-ray or on certain streaming platforms. This difference has to do with censorship of profanity and other adult content. When Rick and Morty airs on Adult Swim television broadcasts, strong language is censored. This is done to maintain a TV-14 rating, which means the content is suitable for viewers aged 14 and older with parental guidance. The TV-14 rating allows some mature content, but has restrictions on the strongest forms of profanity. The most consistently censored word is one that starts with the letter F. This word and all its variations are always bleeped out on television broadcasts without exception. Every single time a character says this word on TV, viewers hear a bleep sound covering it up. The bleep is an electronic tone that masks the audio of the profanity. This happens in every episode across all seasons when the show airs on television. Another word that gets censored on television is one that starts with the letter S. However, this word is treated differently than the F word. Sometimes this word is left uncensored and viewers can hear it clearly. Other times it gets bleeped out. The decision about whether to censor this particular word seems to depend on how frequently it appears in an episode. If the word is used many times in a single episode, Adult Swim may choose to bleep out some or all instances to avoid excessive profanity. If it only appears once or twice, it might be left uncensored. The word that starts with D and refers to a body part is handled similarly, with some instances censored and others left alone. There are also other mild to moderate curse words in the show that generally do not get censored on television. Words like damn, hell, ass, crap, bitch, and bastard typically air without bleeps. The situation changes completely when viewers watch Rick and Morty on DVD or Blu-ray. Physical media releases of the show are completely uncensored. This means every word of profanity is audible without any bleeps covering it up. The F word that is always bleeped on television is spoken clearly on DVD and Blu-ray releases. The same goes for all other profanity. Fans who buy the physical media get to hear the dialogue exactly as the actors recorded it in the studio, without any audio censorship. This creates a very different viewing experience. The uncensored versions allow the comedy and dialogue to flow more naturally because there are no interrupting bleep sounds. Many fans prefer the uncensored versions because they feel the jokes land better without censorship. Some viewers have noted that Rick uses certain profanity so appropriately in context that hearing it uncensored makes the dialogue significantly funnier. Streaming platforms have varied approaches to censoring Rick and Morty. The situation with streaming is more complicated than television or physical media because different platforms make different choices, and the censorship varies by season. Seasons 1 and 2 were censored on some streaming platforms like Hulu and HBO Max in their earlier releases. This meant those platforms showed the same censored versions with bleeps that aired on television. However, Seasons 3 and 4 were made available uncensored on most streaming platforms, with the exception of live TV streaming. Later, some streaming services updated their earlier seasons to include uncensored versions as well. HBO Max, which later became just Max, eventually offered uncensored versions of Rick and Morty. Amazon Prime Video also provides uncensored episodes. iTunes sells uncensored digital downloads of each season. The reason for censorship on television broadcasts has to do with rating standards. Cable networks like Adult Swim are not regulated by the Federal Communications Commission in the same way that broadcast networks are. Technically, cable channels could show stronger content without government penalties. However, Adult Swim still maintains certain standards to appeal to advertisers and a broad audience. By keeping the rating at TV-14 rather than TVMA, mature audiences only, the network can potentially reach more viewers and attract more advertisers. If the show aired with all profanity uncensored, it would require a TVMA rating. This could limit the show's audience and make some advertisers uncomfortable about being associated with it. So the censorship on television is a business decision rather than a legal requirement. The difference between censored and uncensored versions has created a noticeable divide in the fan experience. Viewers who only watch Rick and Morty through television reruns on Adult Swim get the censored version with bleeps. Meanwhile, viewers who watch through DVD, Blu-ray, or most streaming services get the uncensored version. Some fans have reported being surprised when they switched from one format to another. A fan might watch the show on television for years and then purchase a DVD set, only to be shocked by the amount of strong language they suddenly hear. Conversely, someone might watch uncensored episodes on a streaming service and then be confused by all the bleeps when they see a rerun on TV. Various online databases and fan wikis track the censorship in Rick and Morty episodes. These resources document which words are censored in which episodes and note the differences between broadcast and home video versions. The Censorship Wiki, for example, has extensive documentation of every bleeped word in every episode of the series. This level of detail shows how much fans pay attention to the censorship issue. Some fans even prefer the censored versions because they find the bleeps themselves funny. There is an argument that part of Rick and Morty's humor comes from the contrast between its childish animation style and its adult content. The bleeps emphasize this contrast by making it sound like a children's cartoon that has been corrupted with profanity. However, most fans and critics agree that the uncensored versions provide the best viewing experience because they present the show as the creators intended. Season 1 contains 36 uses of the F-word according to censorship trackers. All of these are bleeped on television broadcasts but fully audible on DVD, Blu-ray, and uncensored streaming versions. As the series has progressed through multiple seasons, the amount of strong language has generally increased. Beginning with Season 2, strong language appears more frequently, resulting in more censorship on television broadcasts. Later seasons contain even more profanity than the early seasons. This means the difference between censored and uncensored versions becomes more noticeable in later seasons because there are more bleeps interrupting the dialogue. The uncensored versions are marketed as a selling point for physical media. DVD and Blu-ray releases often advertise that they contain uncensored episodes. Customer reviews on retail websites frequently mention being happy about the uncensored content. One reviewer on Best Buy noted that while the censored version on TV has bleeps for the F-word, the Blu-ray version is uncensored and includes all the profanity, which makes it much funnier. Another reviewer said they would give more than 5 stars if possible because the Blu-ray version is better without the bleeps, and some dialogue was even changed to include more strong language. Digital purchases on iTunes also explicitly note that seasons are uncensored, making this clear to potential buyers before they purchase. It is worth noting that the censorship only applies to audio. The show does not censor or blur out visual content in most cases on any platform. However, there have been a few exceptions. Some episodes contain pixelation or blurring of nudity or graphic imagery, and these visual censors appear on both broadcast and home video versions. For example, one episode features alien anatomy that is pixelated even on DVD and Blu-ray releases, but these visual censors are relatively rare compared to the consistent audio censorship on television. The vast majority of censorship in Rick and Morty involves bleeping profanity rather than blurring images. International releases of Rick and Morty vary in their censorship. Some international markets receive uncensored versions, while others have censored versions similar to U.S. television broadcasts. The availability of uncensored episodes depends on the broadcasting standards and streaming deals in each country. In Canada, the show airs on Adult Swim with similar censorship to the U.S. television broadcasts. In other regions, streaming services may offer uncensored versions, as they do in the United States. The creators of Rick and Morty have not publicly stated strong opinions about the censorship one way or another. They write the show with profanity included, knowing it will be bleeped on television but available uncensored on other platforms. This dual approach allows the show to maintain a TV-14 rating for broadcast, while still delivering the full uncensored experience to viewers who seek it out on DVD, Blu-ray, or streaming. The strategy has proven successful, as Rick and Morty has become one of Adult Swim's most popular and profitable shows despite the censorship on television. Some streaming services started with censored versions but later switched to uncensored. This created confusion for viewers who watched earlier seasons with bleeps and then suddenly encountered uncensored language in later seasons on the same platform. Eventually, most major streaming services standardized on providing uncensored versions to match the home video releases. This gives streaming subscribers the same experience as DVD and Blu-ray owners. However, viewers watching through live TV streaming services or on-demand cable services may still see censored versions depending on their provider. The censorship differences have sparked discussions among fans about which version is the true version of the show. Purists argue that the uncensored version represents the creator's actual vision and should be considered the definitive version. Others point out that most viewers have historically watched the show on television with bleeps, so the censored version is actually what most people experience. Some fans have even argued that the bleeps add to the comedy by creating a specific rhythm and emphasizing the profanity through censorship. However, the fact that the creators include profanity in their scripts and perform it in the voice recording booth suggests they intend for the uncensored version to be the complete experience. Adult Swim has produced other adult animated shows with similar censorship patterns. Shows like Robot Chicken and Aqua Teen Hunger Force also feature bleeps on television broadcasts while offering uncensored versions on home video. This is standard practice for the network. What makes Rick and Morty notable is the sheer amount of profanity, particularly in later seasons, which means more bleeps and a more noticeable difference between versions. Some episodes have dozens of bleeps, creating an almost constant interruption of the audio on television broadcasts. Special features included with DVD and Blu-ray releases are also uncensored. Commentaries, behind-the-scenes footage, and other bonus content contain profanity without bleeps. The Inside the Episode features and recording booth sessions included as special features show the voice actors using profanity freely during production. This gives viewers insight into the creative process and confirms that profanity is an intentional part of the show's writing and performance, not something added in post-production. The financial success of Rick and Morty merchandise and home video sales suggests that fans value having access to uncensored content. The show has generated hundreds of millions of dollars through various revenue streams, including DVD and Blu-ray sales, digital downloads, and streaming rights. Part of this success comes from fans purchasing physical media or digital copies specifically to get uncensored versions. Viewers who are serious fans of the show often invest in these uncensored versions, even if they have access to censored versions through television or certain streaming services. Future seasons of Rick and Morty will likely continue the same pattern. Television broadcasts will include bleeps to maintain the TV-14 rating, while physical media and most streaming platforms will offer uncensored versions. This dual approach allows Adult Swim to maximize the show's audience and profitability. As long as Rick and Morty remains on Adult Swim, viewers can expect this censorship divide to continue. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to the moment, Adult Swim locked in 70 episodes with a single massive renewal, then expanded the commitment even further. Adult Swim locked in 70 episodes in a single renewal, and then extended again. Most television shows get renewed one season at a time. Networks watch the ratings come in, see if people are tuning in, and then decide if they want to order more episodes. This is how things normally work in the television business. A show does well, the network gives it another season, and everyone moves forward hoping the success continues. For animated series, this process can be even more uncertain because cartoons take longer to produce than live-action shows. Animation requires months of work for each episode, so networks typically cannot just quickly order more content when a show becomes popular. Rick and Morty changed this pattern completely in May 2018. Adult Swim announced they were ordering 70 brand new episodes all at once. This was not a renewal for one season or even 2 seasons. This was a massive order that guaranteed the show would continue for years into the future. At the time of the announcement, Rick and Morty had aired only 31 episodes across 3 seasons since the show started in December 2013. The 70-episode order more than doubled the amount of content the show had already produced. Adult Swim called this a long-term deal with creators, Justin Roiland and Dan Harmon, and the order would bring the total episode count to 101, which passed the traditional syndication threshold of 100 episodes. This kind of deal almost never happens for animated series. Most shows get 10 to 13 episode orders per season. Some might get renewed for 2 seasons if they are doing really well. But 70 episodes all at once was basically unheard of in the animation world. For comparison, many animated shows on cable networks run for 10 episodes per season and might get renewed for a second season if the ratings are strong. A third season is considered a major success. Rick and Morty was getting guaranteed content all the way through a 10th season with one single contract. The decision made sense from Adult Swim's perspective because Rick and Morty had become a ratings powerhouse. The Season 3 finale that aired in October 2017 pulled in a 3.9 rating among adults aged 18 to 24 and a 3.2 rating among adults aged 18 to 34 inches the Live Plus same-day Nielsen ratings. These were the highest ratings in Adult Swim's entire history as a network. The show had also ranked as the #1 comedy across all of television for millennials in 2017, beating out major broadcast network shows like The Big Bang Theory, Modern Family, and Saturday Night Live. Rick and Morty was bringing in viewers that networks desperately wanted to reach. Beyond just television ratings, Rick and Morty had become a multi-platform sensation. The show was huge on social media, with fans creating endless memes and discussion online. There were video games based on the series. Merchandise was selling extremely well. The show had built a dedicated fan base that consumed Rick and Morty content across every possible medium. Adult Swim could see that this was not just a popular cartoon, but a genuine cultural phenomenon that could sustain itself for many years. Getting the deal done took significant time and effort. Dan Harmon mentioned before the announcement that contract negotiations had gotten complicated. This makes sense when you consider the size of the order. Negotiating a 70-episode deal involves far more money and far more commitment than a standard 1 or 2 season renewal. Both sides needed to agree on budgets, schedules, creative control, and all the other details that go into producing that much television content. The fact that the negotiations were complex shows how seriously both Adult Swim and the creators took this massive order. When the deal was finally announced on the 10th of May 2018, Roiland and Harmon celebrated in characteristic fashion. They posted a video on Instagram showing them in a shower together at Harmon's house, announcing they were going back to work on the series. The video was weird and funny and perfectly in line with the offbeat humor that made Rick and Morty popular in the first place. Roiland also tweeted about the renewal, joking that he was looking forward to all the tweets asking where the new episodes were, since Rick and Morty had become somewhat notorious for long gaps between seasons. Those long gaps between seasons were actually part of the reason Adult Swim wanted such a large order. Rick and Morty had taken about a year and a half between Season 2 and Season 3, and fans had complained loudly about the wait. The show was difficult to produce because the creators were very particular about quality, and because animation simply takes time. With 70 episodes ordered, the hope was that production could become more consistent. The creators would not need to stop working to negotiate new deals between every season. They could plan out multiple seasons of storytelling in advance and keep the production pipeline moving more smoothly. The 70-episode order was structured to cover seasons 4 through 10, with each season typically running 10 episodes. This meant Adult Swim had committed to at least 7 more seasons of Rick and Morty beyond what had already aired. For fans, this was incredible news because it meant the show they loved would definitely be around for many more years. For the production team, it meant job security and the ability to plan long-term story arcs without worrying about cancellation. Adult Swim was also making a smart business move by locking down Rick and Morty for so long. Animation is expensive to produce, but successful animated series can generate enormous amounts of revenue through merchandise, streaming deals, international sales, and syndication. By securing 70 episodes, Adult Swim ensured they would own a large library of Rick and Morty content that could be sold and resold across multiple platforms for decades. The show was already valuable, and 70 more episodes would only increase that value. The announcement sent shockwaves through the television industry. Other networks took notice of how Adult Swim had committed so heavily to an animated series. Trade publications wrote articles analyzing the deal and what it meant for the future of adult animation. Fans celebrated online, creating memes and jokes about how Rick and Morty was now set to run forever, referencing a line from the show itself where the character promises Rick and Morty adventures for 100 years. However, the massive renewal could not protect the show from controversy. In January 2023, news broke that Justin Roiland had been charged with felony domestic battery, with corporal injury, and one felony count of false imprisonment by menace, violence, fraud, and deceit in Orange County, California. The charges stemmed from an incident in January 2020 involving an unnamed woman Roiland had reportedly been dating. The case had been kept quiet, but once the information became public, Adult Swim moved quickly. On the 24th of January 2023, Adult Swim released a statement saying they had ended their association with Justin Roiland. This was a massive decision because Roiland was not just the co-creator of Rick and Morty. He also voiced both of the main characters, Rick Sanchez and Morty Smith, as well as several other recurring characters on the show. Losing Roiland meant the show would need to recast its two title characters with new voice actors, something that would be immediately noticeable to every single viewer. The decision to fire Roiland came even though the 70-episode order was still in progress. The show was only midway through that massive renewal, with 4 more seasons still to produce. But Adult Swim determined that continuing to work with Roiland was not acceptable given the charges against him. The network announced that Rick and Morty would continue without Roiland, with the talented and dedicated crew continuing to work on Season 7. In March 2023, the criminal charges against Roiland were dismissed by the Orange County District Attorney's Office due to insufficient evidence. Roiland released a statement saying he had always known the claims were false and that he was determined to move forward and focus on his creative projects. His lawyer thanked the district attorney's office for conducting a thorough review and dismissing the case. However, the dismissal of the criminal charges did not change Adult Swim's decision. Roiland remained fired from Rick and Morty. Things became more complicated in September 2023 when NBC News published a report with new allegations against Roiland. Multiple people came forward claiming that Roiland had used his fame to pursue and meet young women, several of whom were underage at the time. One woman alleged that Roiland had sexually assaulted her. Through his attorney, Roiland denied all of these allegations and called them false and defamatory. Dan Harmon, the other co-creator of Rick and Morty, responded to the new allegations by saying he was frustrated, ashamed, and heartbroken that hard work and passion from the show could be leveraged to exploit and harm strangers. Despite all this behind-the-scenes drama, Rick and Morty moved forward. Adult Swim and the production team launched a search for new voice actors to replace Roiland as Rick and Morty. Showrunner Scott Martyr led the casting process, which took 6 months and involved hearing thousands of potential candidates. The goal was to make the transition as seamless as possible so that viewers would barely notice the change in voices. The search eventually led to 2 relatively unknown actors. Ian Cardoni, a voice actor from the Boston area who had done promo work and minor roles, was cast as Rick Sanchez. Harry Belden, an actor from Chicago who had appeared in shows like Joe Pera Talks With You and Chicago Med, was cast as Morty Smith. The decision to cast 2 separate actors instead of having one person voice both characters was intentional. It would make the workload easier and help ensure the show could continue for many more years without being dependent on a single voice performer. Adult Swim kept the names of the new voice actors secret until the Season 7 premiere aired on the 15th of October, 2023. Fans had heard the new voices in the Season 7 trailer that dropped in September, but the network refused to reveal who was doing the voices. Even press screeners of the new season did not include credits at the end. The mystery built anticipation for the premiere, and when the episode finally aired, the credits revealed Ian Cardone and Harry Belden as the new voices of Rick and Morty. The reception to the new voices was generally positive. Both Cardone and Belden had clearly studied Roiland's original performances closely and were able to capture the essence of the characters. Cardone's Rick sounded almost identical to the version from Season 6, with perhaps slightly less slurred speech than in earlier seasons. Belden's Morty also hit the right notes of anxious, pubescent panic that defined the character. Some fans felt the voices lacked the raw passion and spontaneity of Roiland's original performances, but most agreed the recasting was handled as well as could be expected given the circumstances. With new voice actors in place and the production team working smoothly, Rick and Morty continued toward the end of the original 70-episode order. Season 7 completed its run in December 2023. Season 8 was already fully written and was set to premiere in 2025. Work had begun on Season 9, and conversations about Season 10 were underway. The show was moving toward the conclusion of that massive deal Adult Swim had made back in 2018, but Adult Swim was not done investing in Rick and Morty. On the 17th of October 2024, executive producers Dan Harmon and Scott Marty appeared at a panel for Rick and Morty at New York Comic Con. They were joined by the voice cast, including Ian Cardone, Harry Belden, Sarah Chalke, Spencer Grammer, and Chris Parnell. At this panel, the team announced that Rick and Morty had been renewed for 2 additional seasons, bringing the total through Season 12. This new renewal meant Rick and Morty was now guaranteed to run through at least 2029. Season 8 was set for 2025, which meant the show would be releasing new seasons every year for the next several years. Michael Owalene, the president of Adult Swim, released a statement saying that from Season 1, Rick and Morty had set a new standard in adult animation and showed no signs of stopping. He praised Dan Harmon, Scott Marty, and the rest of the talented team for constantly outdoing themselves. Dan Harmon responded to the renewal by saying, "Nobody wants a universe without Rick and Morty, and fortunately, the list of places to go remains infinite." This was a reference to the show's premise of infinite parallel dimensions and infinite possibilities for adventure. Scott Marty, who had taken over as showrunner in Season 5, said it was a gift to be renewed beyond the previously announced Season 10. He referenced another line from the show itself, saying Rick and Morty would run for 100 years, forever. The renewal through Season 12 proved that Rick and Morty had survived everything thrown at it. The show had lost one of its co-creators and both of its original voice actors. It had weathered major controversy and public scrutiny. It had faced the challenge of recasting its 2 main characters and winning back skeptical fans. And through all of that, it remained Adult Swim's #1 series and one of Warner Bros. Discovery's most recognizable currently running properties. Rick and Morty had ranked as the #1 comedy across cable during its 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th seasons. The show had won the Emmy for Outstanding Animated Program twice. It had spawned spin-off series, comic books, video games, and massive amounts of merchandise. The Season 7 premiere had debuted in over 134 countries in 38 languages, showing just how international the fanbase had become. The show was a genuine global phenomenon. From the outside, the journey from that massive 70-episode order in 2018 to the Season 12 renewal in 2024 looked like a success story. Adult Swim had made a huge bet on Rick and Morty, and that bet had paid off even when major obstacles appeared. The network had shown commitment to the series through difficult times, and the creative team had proven they could maintain quality and keep audiences engaged even after losing one of the original creators. For fans, the renewal through Season 12 meant years more of the adventures they loved. Rick and Morty would continue traveling through dimensions, getting into trouble, and delivering the dark science fiction comedy that had made the show so popular. The original 70-episode order that seemed so massive back in 2018 would be surpassed. The show that started as an obscene parody of Back to the Future on Channel 101 had become one of the biggest animated series of its era, with a guaranteed future stretching toward the end of the decade. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to how the franchise now stretches into comics, manga, and multiple spin-offs, most of which sit in a soft canon zone. The franchise extends beyond the TV show into comics, manga, and spin-offs, though much of that is soft canon. Rick and Morty quickly expanded beyond television into a sprawling franchise of comics, manga, and spin-off series. These extensions of the Rick and Morty universe occupy what fans and creators describe as a soft canon zone, where stories technically exist within the multiverse established by the show, but operate with significant creative freedom. The result is a complex web of interconnected content that both respects and playfully disregards traditional ideas about what counts as official continuity. The comic book series began in April 2015 when Oni Press started publishing Rick and Morty monthly issues. The comics were written initially by Zach Gorman for the first 2 volumes, then Kyle Starks took over for volumes 3 through 12, and Alex Fire handled volumes 13 and 14. Artist Mark Ellerby provided illustrations throughout the run, creating a visual style that captured the essence of the show while working within the constraints of static comic panels. From the start, the comics cleverly addressed the question of canon by using the show's own multiverse concept as a solution. The first 2 volumes of the comic series explicitly followed Rick and Morty from Dimension C-132, not the main Rick and Morty from the television series who come from Dimension C-137. This allowed the comic writers to tell whatever stories they wanted without worrying about contradicting events from the show. They could kill characters, destroy planets, or make major changes to the Smith family dynamic without affecting what happened on television. Starting with Volume 3 and the Headspace story arc in issues 12 through 14, the comics switched focus to following the same Rick C-137 and Morty from the television series. This meant the comics were now depicting off-screen adventures of the main characters between episodes of the show. Elements from specific television episodes would be referenced in the comics, and occasionally the comics would feature sequel storylines that picked up threads the show had introduced but never fully explored. The relationship between the comics and the show became even more interconnected when references started flowing in both directions. In the Season 3 episode, The Ricklantis Mix-Up, the Shadow Council of Ricks mentions that the Citadel had previously been taken over by a goddamn Jerry. This was a direct reference to the comic series story arc, A Tale of Two Jerrys, from issues 21 through 23, where Doofus Jerry enslaves all the Ricks in the council. The show was acknowledging events from the comics as part of its history. Similarly, elements from the comic series Rick and Morty Presents Birdperson and The Flesh Curtains were adapted into the Season 5 episode Rickternal Friendshine of the Spotless Mort. The comics and television show were not just coexisting but actively borrowing from each other, blurring the lines between what counted as television canon and what counted as comic canon. The original Oni Press comic series ran for 60 issues, concluding in March 2020. A limited revival of the main Rick and Morty comic series launched in January 2023 and ended in December 2023. Beyond the main series, Oni Press published numerous spin-off limited series and one-shots. These included Rick and Morty Presents, an anthology series that followed supporting characters from the show in their own adventures starting in 2018. One particularly ambitious crossover came in August 2018 when Rick and Morty collided with Dungeons & Dragons. The 4-issue miniseries Rick and Morty vs. Dungeons & Dragons was co-written by Jim Zub and Patrick Rothfuss with art by Troy Little. The series proved popular enough to warrant a sequel, Rick and Morty vs. Dungeons & Dragons Chapter 2 Painscape, which ran from September to December 2019. The crossover made logical sense given that Rick and Morty frequently played with sci-fi and fantasy tropes, and Dungeons & Dragons offered a structured rule system that the show's anarchic characters could gleefully disregard and exploit. The comics also allowed Rick and Morty to address holidays and events the television show had never gotten around to covering. The tie-in comics included Halloween specials, New Year celebrations, and other seasonal content that filled gaps in the franchise's calendar. These standalone one-shots gave fans Rick and Morty content during long waits between television seasons, while exploring concepts the show itself might never have time to address. In 2023, Oni Press released Rick and Morty, the manga volume 1 Get in the Robot, Morty. Written by Alyssa M. Sala and illustrated by Jay Oden, the manga-styled graphic novel featured Rick and Morty battling giant naked Jerrys called Giants. The manga was a loving parody of classic Japanese giant robot anime, with Morty piloting a mech designed by Rick to fight the towering Jerry variants. The design of Morty's robot drew clear inspiration from Neon Genesis Evangelion, while the giants themselves referenced Attack on Titan's mindless naked giants. The manga demonstrated how Rick and Morty could adapt its satirical approach to different cultural formats, while maintaining the core humor and character dynamics that made the show popular. Beyond comics and manga, Rick and Morty spawned its first animated spin-off series in 2022. Vindicators 2 premiered on Adult Swim's YouTube channel on the 23rd of July 2022, with all 10 episodes released simultaneously. Each episode ran between 2 and 5 minutes, making the entire series easy to watch in a single sitting. The spin-off was created by Sarah Carabiner and Erica Rosbay, who had written the original Vindicators episode for Season 3 of Rick and Morty. The Vindicators had first appeared in the Season 3 episode Vindicators 3, The Return of Worldender, in August 2017. The episode introduced the team as galaxy-spanning superheroes who recruited Rick and Morty for their third mission together. The episode revealed that Rick and Morty had been deliberately excluded from the second Vindicators mission due to personality conflicts, meaning Rick's abrasive behavior had gotten him uninvited from a superhero team-up. Vindicators 2, the spin-off series, told the story of that second mission, showing what happened when the team fought without Rick's help. The series featured the original voice cast, returning to reprise their roles. Christian Slater voiced Vance Maximus, Jillian Jacobs played Supernova, Lance Reddick voiced Alan Rails, Maurice LaMarche performed as Crocubot, Tom Kenny played Million Ants, and Justin Roiland voiced Noob Noob. The short format allowed Carabiner and Rosby to explore slice-of-life moments and character dynamics that would not fit into standard 22-minute episodes. The series revealed darker truths about the Vindicators, including that Supernova had accidentally destroyed a planet while having a miscarriage, and that several team members supposedly killed by the villain Doom Nomatron had actually been murdered by Supernova herself during a drunken breakdown. Production on Vindicators 2 took place entirely over Zoom during the pandemic, with voice actors recording from home. Carabiner expressed interest in producing more seasons of the series if Adult Swim wanted to continue it, though no additional seasons have been announced as of this writing. Following Justin Roiland's firing from the franchise in January 2023, it was announced that his voice roles, including Noob Noob, would need to be recast if future Vindicators content was produced. The most ambitious Rick and Morty spin-off arrived in August 2024 when Rick and Morty, the anime, premiered on Adult Swim. Created, written, and directed by Takashi Sano, the 10-episode anime series represented a completely different visual and tonal take on the Rick and Morty universe. Sano had previously directed several acclaimed Rick and Morty anime shorts, including Rick and Morty vs. Genocider and Summer Meets God Rick Meets Evil, that premiered between 2020 and 2021. These shorts generated over 10 million combined views on Adult Swim's digital platforms, demonstrating significant audience interest in seeing Rick and Morty through an anime lens. Adult Swim announced the full anime series order in May 2022, commissioning 10 episodes from Telecom Animation Film with Sano as the creative lead. The series was produced by Sola Entertainment with Jason DeMarco and Joseph Cho serving as executive producers. Unlike most American adaptations of anime styles, Rick and Morty, the anime, was actually animated in Japan by Japanese studios using authentic anime production methods. The anime featured an entirely new voice cast in both Japanese and English. Yohei Tadano voiced Rick in Japanese, while Keisuke Chiba voiced Morty, with both actors reprising roles they had performed in the Japanese dub of the original animated series. For the English version, completely different actors were cast, instead of using the television show's existing voice talent. This creative decision emphasized that the anime was meant to stand as its own distinct interpretation, rather than simply being another season of the regular show with different animation. Rick and Morty. The anime was set between the 5th and 6th seasons of the main series during the period when portal travel had been shut down. The anime introduced new characters like L, a time warrior who becomes involved with Morty, and explored parallel storylines involving Space Morty and Jerry Prime. The visual style was distinctly different from the main show, using brownish-colored lines instead of stark black outlines to make colors appear more vibrant. The opening theme, Love is Entropy, was a 2-minute song that bounced between different musical genres, dramatically different from the synthesizer-heavy theme of the original series. The question of whether these various spin-offs and expansions count as canon has been a subject of ongoing discussion among fans and creators. The multiverse concept central to Rick and Morty provides convenient cover for treating almost anything as potentially canonical. As Jason DeMarco explained when discussing Rick and Morty, the anime, in a world with infinite multiverses, one of those multiverses is going to be an anime multiverse, which makes the anime automatically canon, because within the multiverse almost anything could be canon. This approach to canon reflects what fans sometimes call soft canon, where stories exist within the universe established by the main show but are not required viewing to understand the primary narrative. The comics from Volume 3 onward technically follow the same Rick C-137 from the television series and sometimes reference or influence television episodes, making them harder canon than earlier volumes. The Vindicators 2 series fills in backstory explicitly referenced in a television episode, giving it a degree of canonical weight. Rick and Morty. The anime exists in its own version of the multiverse with its own set of rules and characters, making it simultaneously canon as an alternate universe and separate from the main continuity. Dan Harmon and the Rick and Morty writing team have maintained an ambiguous relationship with the concept of canon throughout the show's run. The series frequently plays with ideas about whether audiences are following the same Rick and Morty in every episode, given how easily characters can travel between dimensions. Some episodes explicitly identify Rick as C-137, while other episodes never confirm which dimension viewers are watching. This makes it difficult to definitively say what is or is not canon even within the television series itself, let alone across comics, manga, and spin-offs. The show has occasionally broken its own rules for comedic effect, such as when it depicted time travel in one episode, despite Rick repeatedly claiming time travel is off-limits. If the main series treats its own continuity playfully, then spin-off media operating in a soft canon zone makes perfect sense. The comics can tell stories about Rick and Morty that feel true to the characters without needing to perfectly align with every detail of television continuity. The anime can explore emotional and philosophical themes using familiar characters while existing in its own artistic universe. From a practical standpoint, this approach allows maximum creative freedom for all involved. Comic writers can pitch ambitious multi-issue story arcs without worrying about whether the television writers have different plans for the same characters. The anime team can create their own mythology and character relationships that might contradict details from the show without causing problems. Viewers and readers can engage with whichever versions of Rick and Morty they prefer without feeling they are missing essential information if they skip certain formats. The soft canon approach also protects the main television series from being burdened by too much continuity from other media. If every comic storyline had to be treated as hard canon that could never be contradicted, the television writers would need to read and track hundreds of comic issues to avoid continuity errors. By allowing the comics and other media to exist in their own space within the multiverse, everyone can create without being constrained by what happened in other versions. The Rick and Morty franchise has essentially created a tiered system of canonicity. The main television series sits at the top as the primary canon that defines the core characters and universe. Comics from Volume 3 onward exist in a middle tier, where they follow the main characters and occasionally intersect with television continuity. Earlier comic volumes, the manga, and spin-off series like Vindicators 2 and the anime occupy a softer canon tier, where they are official licensed content that captures the spirit of Rick and Morty while telling their own stories. This expansion into multiple formats and interpretations has helped Rick and Morty maintain relevance during long gaps between television seasons. When fans had to wait years for new episodes, they could read comics, watch the Vindicators spin-off on YouTube, or explore the anime's unique take on familiar characters. The franchise generated ongoing revenue and kept fans engaged, even when new television content was not available. The comics in particular provided steady monthly content that television animation could never match in terms of consistent output. The existence of soft canon has also allowed different creative voices to put their stamp on Rick and Morty. Kyle Starks brought his particular brand of humor to the comics during his long run as writer. Takashi Sano infused the anime with his love of classic mecha anime and emotional storytelling. These creators could explore aspects of Rick and Morty that might not fit the television show's tone or pacing while still producing work that felt authentically part of the universe. For fans, navigating the soft canon requires deciding how much they want to invest in content beyond the television series. Casual viewers can watch the show without ever knowing comics or spin-offs exist and miss nothing essential to understanding Rick and Morty's story. Dedicated fans who want more content can dive into comics and spin-offs knowing they are getting official licensed stories that expand the universe even if they occupy an ambiguous canonical status. The tiered approach accommodates different levels of fan engagement without punishing anyone for their level of investment. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we have the multiverse itself becoming the core of the series, with infinite timelines and countless versions of Rick and Morty existing at the same time. The multiverse concept is central. The show acknowledges infinite realities and many versions of Rick and Morty. Rick and Morty explores the multiverse in ways that go beyond simple alternate universe stories. The show treats the existence of infinite realities as both a creative playground and a philosophical statement about existence itself. From the very first episode, Rick has used his portal gun to travel to different dimensions, casually hopping between realities as if traveling between rooms in a house. This technology forms the foundation for countless adventures, but it also creates a framework where actions can have permanent consequences across multiple versions of reality. The most important reveal about Rick and Morty's multiverse came in the 5th season finale titled Rick Murai Jack. A throwaway line from Season 1 episode Closed Rick Counters of the Rick Kind mentioned the central finite curve, but this term vanished for 4 seasons. When Evil Morty explained the central finite curve in Season 5, it recontextualized the entire show. The central finite curve is a deliberately constructed barrier separating all universes where Rick Sanchez is the smartest person alive from the rest of infinite reality. Rick and other founders of the Council of Ricks built this using advanced portal gun technology. They essentially walled off every reality where Rick stands at the top of the intellectual food chain and isolated themselves from any universe where Rick might not be the dominant force. This represents a massive act of cosmic manipulation. Among infinite realities, countless universes exist where Rick never became a genius scientist. There are realities where he died young, where he never pursued science, where he was less intelligent than other people in his world, or where he simply never existed at all. The Ricks who formed the Citadel and Council decided to lock away every universe that did not feature a Rick at the top. Every reality accessible through standard portal gun travel contains a Rick guaranteed to be the smartest being in that universe. The barrier works both ways. Ricks and Mortys inside the central finite curve cannot travel to universes outside it, and beings from outside the curve cannot enter the walled-off section of the multiverse. This cosmic segregation served multiple purposes for the Ricks who created it. First, it ensured that they would never encounter a reality where they were not the most powerful and intelligent being around. Second, it maintained the illusion that Rick is universally supreme across all of existence. Anyone who only travels within the central finite curve would naturally assume that every reality contains a Rick at the top of the power structure, because they have no way to access universes that contradict this pattern. Third, the central finite curve functioned as a protective measure. Rick has accumulated many enemies throughout his travels, including the Galactic Federation and various other powerful organizations. By isolating themselves within the curve, the Ricks created a safe zone where they could operate without worrying about threats from universes they could not control. The central finite curve also explains the existence of the Citadel of Ricks, the massive space station where thousands of Ricks and Mortys from different dimensions gather. Rick C-137, the main Rick, followed throughout the series, helped design and construct both the central finite curve and the Citadel during his quest to find Rick Prime, the version of Rick who murdered his wife Diane and daughter Beth. When Rick Prime killed Rick C-137's family, Rick C-137 invented portal gun technology and began hunting his family's killer across the multiverse. During this hunt, he killed many other Ricks and made enemies of Ricks across multiple dimensions. Eventually, Rick C-137 made a deal with other Ricks. He would help them build a safe haven and isolate a section of the multiverse where they could protect themselves from their enemies. In exchange, they would leave him alone to continue his search for Rick Prime. This agreement led to the construction of the Citadel and the implementation of the central finite curve. The Council of Ricks served as the Citadel's governing body for years. 6 powerful Ricks made themselves the ultimate authority over all Ricks and Mortys within the central finite curve. The Council assigned Mortys to Ricks, created portal gun laws, and maintained military forces, including an elite unit called SEAL Team Ricks. They created a caste system with Ricks at the top and Mortys as second-class citizens or property. Mortys were mass-produced through cloning and sold as sidekicks and cloaking devices, since Morty brainwaves hide Rick's genius from detection. The Council manipulated events across dimensions to ensure Beth and Jerry met and had children, guaranteeing steady Morty supplies. Rick C-137 eventually turned against the Council after they tried to assassinate him when he was captured by the Galactic Federation. Rick teleported the entire Citadel into a Galactic Federation prison, causing massive chaos and destruction that killed countless Ricks and Mortys. During the resulting battle, Rick killed most of the Council of Ricks. After the Council's death, the Citadel transitioned to a democratic government and held elections for a president. A Morty candidate ran on a platform of equality between Ricks and Mortys and won the election. This Morty was later revealed to be Evil Morty, the same Morty who had controlled Evil Rick as a puppet years earlier. Evil Morty's entire campaign and presidency were part of a master plan to escape the central finite curve. Evil Morty represents a significant character in exploring the multiverse. Unlike most Mortys, he possesses intelligence rivaling many Ricks. He understood the central finite curve as a prison where every Morty exists only to serve Rick. Evil Morty wanted to escape this system. As Citadel president, he secretly built a device to punch through the curve. He captured Rick C-137, scanned his memories for necessary information, then activated his plan. He overcharged the Citadel's dimensional drive, blasting through the curve. This destroyed the Citadel and killed countless Ricks and Mortys. But Evil Morty escaped into the broader multiverse using a yellow portal gun that accessed realities standard green portal guns could never reach. The destruction of the central finite curve changed everything about Rick and Morty's multiverse. For the first time in the show's history, the barrier separating Rick's domains from the rest of infinite reality had been breached. This opened up the possibility of encountering realities where Rick is not the smartest person, where he does not exist at all, or where completely different power structures dominate. The show has only begun to explore what exists beyond the central finite curve, but the mere existence of this broader multiverse reframes the entire series. Everything viewers had seen up to that point took place within a carefully curated section of reality specifically designed to maintain Rick's supremacy. The central finite curve's destruction represents a fundamental shift in the show's cosmology and opens doors to entirely new types of stories and character interactions. The central finite curve also explains several mysteries from earlier seasons. Viewers had noticed that despite visiting many different dimensions, the show never showed a universe where Rick was not a genius or where he did not exist. This absence now makes perfect sense because all portal gun travel was restricted to the central finite curve. The curve also explains why so many Ricks exist across the multiverse despite the death of Diane. Rick Prime killed Diane across every universe using the Omega device, which can erase someone from all of reality. Because Rick Prime eliminated Diane from existence, Ricks across the multiverse no longer had families to anchor them. This created the conditions for the Council of Ricks to form, as countless Ricks found themselves alone and searching for purpose across infinite realities. The show demonstrated the multiverse's power and danger long before revealing the central finite curve. The Season 1 episode Rick Potion number 9 showed how casually Rick treats the multiverse and how devastating the consequences can be. In that episode, Morty asked Rick to create a love potion to make his crush Jessica fall in love with him. Rick made the potion using Vol DNA, but when Morty gave it to Jessica, who happened to have the flu, the love potion combined with the flu virus and went airborne. Within minutes, every person on Earth fell in love with Morty. Rick tried to fix the problem with an antidote made from mantis DNA, but this backfired and turned everyone into mantis monsters. His second attempt to reverse the mutations made everything worse, transforming the entire human population into grotesque creatures that Rick called Cronenbergs, named after body horror director David Cronenberg, who is famous for his disturbing films featuring body transformation and mutation. Unable to fix what he had done, Rick scanned the multiverse for a dimension where another version of himself and Morty had solved the Cronenberg problem, but then immediately died in an accident. Rick and Morty traveled to this dimension, which fans call Dimension C, 131, or the replacement dimension, and found their alternate selves dead in the garage from a freak explosion. They buried these bodies in the backyard and took their places in this reality. The episode ends with Morty deeply traumatized by watching himself die and burying his own corpse. While in the background, viewers hear the sounds of construction. Meanwhile, the original dimension was left behind as a Cronenberg wasteland, where the original Jerry, Beth, and Summer continued living, hunting and eating the mutated creatures for survival. Rick told Morty they could only do this kind of dimension swap 3 or 4 more times before running out of suitable replacement universes. This limitation added stakes to the multiverse concept, showing that even infinite realities have constraints and consequences. Rick Potion number 9 established several important rules about how Rick and Morty treats the multiverse. First, it showed that actions have permanent consequences that cannot always be undone, even with portal gun technology and access to infinite realities. The Cronenberg dimension remains destroyed to this day. Second, it revealed that the Rick and Morty viewers follow are not the same Rick and Morty from the pilot episode. The original Rick and Morty stayed behind in the Cronenberg dimension to face the consequences of their actions, while the Rick and Morty in every subsequent episode are technically different versions who took over a new family. Third, it demonstrated that Beth, Jerry, and Summer are also technically different characters than the family viewers met in the first 5 episodes. This creates a strange situation where Morty's family is not really his original biological family anymore, even though they are nearly identical to his family in almost every way possible. The show has referenced Rick Potion number 9 multiple times in later seasons. In the Season 2 episode 60 Minutes, Morty showed Summer the graves in the backyard where he and Rick buried their alternate selves. He used this revelation to convince Summer that nothing matters and existence is meaningless. In the Season 6 premiere Solarix, Rick's portal gun resets sent everyone back to their original dimensions, which meant Morty returned to the Cronenberg world. He discovered that the original Jerry had survived for years, but was killed by Rick Prime, and the original Beth had died from an infection. These callbacks show that the show takes its multiverse seriously and maintains continuity about which dimension characters come from, even when that information is not immediately relevant to current stories. The multiverse allows Rick and Morty to explore the same characters with infinite variations. The show has introduced countless versions of Rick, each with their own personality quirks and life circumstances. Doofus Rick from Dimension J, 19 Zeta 7, is considered the least intelligent Rick by other Ricks, though he is still smart enough to invent ovenless brownies. Other Ricks mock him constantly and spread rumors that he eats feces, though the show's creators confirmed this rumor is false. Doofus Rick never married and never had children, so his Morty was assigned from another dimension where everyone looks like Eric Stoltz from the movie Mask. Unlike most Ricks, Doofus Rick is genuinely kind and formed a real friendship with Jerry, making him perhaps the most emotionally healthy Rick viewers have encountered. Simple Rick appears in the Season 3 episode, Tales from the Citadel, in a commercial for Simple Rick's wafer cookies. This Rick chose family over science and found happiness in being a father to young Beth. However, other Ricks at the Citadel captured Simple Rick and imprisoned him in a wafer cookie factory. They force him to relive his happiest memory of giving Beth a birthday present over and over again, harvesting the brain chemicals produced by this happy memory and putting them into the cookies. This dark setup shows how the Citadel exploits Ricks who chose different paths in life. Cop Rick from the same episode represents another unusual variant, a Rick with an actual moral compass who becomes a police officer and tries to do the right thing. He partners with Cop Morty, a jaded and corrupt Morty who has seen too much darkness. Their partnership ends when Cop Morty kills a criminal and then kills Cop Rick to cover up his own corruption. The show has also featured Cowboy Rick, who dresses like a Western movie character, Wasp Rick, whose whole family became wasps and developed friendlier personalities as a result, and Toxic Rick, who was literally made of Rick's most toxic personality traits when they were separated at a spa. Each of these variants demonstrates that while all Ricks share certain base characteristics, their different life experiences and circumstances create vastly different outcomes. The existence of so many Rick variants raises philosophical questions about identity and nature versus nurture. If infinite versions of Rick exist across the multiverse, each one shaped by slightly different circumstances, then what makes any individual Rick special or unique? The multiverse concept also affects how the show approaches consequences and stakes. When characters can simply jump to a different dimension to escape problems, death and failure lose their usual meaning. The Season 4 episode, the Vat of Acid episode, explored this issue directly. Morty convinced Rick to build a device that would let him save a point in time and reset to that save point whenever he wanted, like saving progress in a video game. Rick built the device and Morty used it to commit crimes, pull pranks, and live without consequences. Morty even fell in love with a girl and spent months building a relationship with her, but when Jerry accidentally activated the device, Morty found himself reset to before they met. When Morty tried to recreate their relationship, everything went wrong and he accidentally overwrote the save point, losing any chance to return to his time with her. Morty apologized to Rick and admitted he learned a lesson about consequences. Then Rick revealed the horrible truth: the device never reset time. It killed Morty and transported his consciousness to an alternate dimension where that dimension's Morty took his place. Every time Morty pressed the button, he killed another version of himself across the multiverse. Rick then merged all these dimensions together, causing everyone Morty wronged in each reality to suddenly remember his crimes simultaneously. An angry mob descended on Rick's house demanding justice. Rick gave Morty only one escape option: jump into a fake vat of acid to fake his death, the exact plan Morty had mocked at the episode's beginning. After Morty complied, Rick revealed they had been in an alternate dimension the entire time, because Rick did not want to waste their home dimension just to prove a point. The Vat of Acid episode won an Emmy Award and demonstrated how the show can use the multiverse to create genuine consequences, even in a reality where consequences seem impossible. Rick Prime represents the darkest aspect of the multiverse, He killed Diane and Beth in Rick C. 137's dimension, setting Rick on his decades-long revenge quest. Rick Prime invented portal gun technology and traveled the multiverse, convincing other Ricks to abandon families. When C-137 refused, preferring his wife and daughter, Rick Prime murdered them with a bomb through a portal. C-137 spent 30 years hunting Rick Prime, killing countless other Ricks. Rick Prime built the Omega device, a weapon erasing someone from every dimension across the multiverse. He used this device to kill Diane in every reality, explaining why viewers never saw a Diane variant. In Season 7 episode, Unmortricken, C-137 finally killed Rick Prime after teaming with evil Morty. C-137 beat Rick Prime to death, achieving his revenge but losing his life's purpose. The multiverse in Rick and Morty is carefully structured reality where Ricks shape the rules to benefit themselves. The central finite curve functions as a cosmic prison, keeping Morty's trapped, serving Rick while maintaining the illusion that Rick's supremacy is universal. The show explores philosophical questions about identity, free will, and whether life has meaning when infinite versions of every event exist. The multiverse presents meaninglessness, but the show argues meaning emerges from specific choices and relationships defining individual experiences. This tension between infinite possibility and finite experience drives Rick and Morty's philosophical storytelling. The multiverse remains the defining concept of Rick and Morty. It shapes every adventure, influences every character decision, and provides the framework for the show's exploration of existence, identity, and meaning. From the central finite curve to the death of Rick Prime, from the Cronenberg dimension to the Citadel of Ricks, the multiverse creates both freedom and constraint, both possibility and consequence. It allows for infinite stories while maintaining continuity and emotional stakes. It makes Rick nearly omnipotent while trapping him in a cosmic structure of his own design. The acknowledgement of infinite realities and countless versions of Rick and Morty is not just a creative gimmick. It is the core of what makes Rick and Morty philosophically ambitious and emotionally resonant despite its cynical surface. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to how the show is created by a surprisingly small writer's room, a very, very tiny team where everyone has to carry a huge amount of the workload. A tiny writer's room responsible for one of TV's most complex animated shows. Rick and Morty runs on a surprisingly small team of writers. The show's co-creator Dan Harmon once described the setup in simple terms. The writing team was a very, very tiny little writer's room with a lot of heavy lifting from everybody. This is unusual for a show that became one of cable television's most watched comedies. Most animated series rely on much larger teams. Rick and Morty took a different path from the start. The show premiered on Adult Swim in December 2013. Justin Roiland and Dan Harmon created it together. Roiland had made an animated short film that parodied Back to the Future. He showed it at Channel 101, a short film festival that Harmon helped create. The two decided to turn the concept into a full series. Adult Swim gave them money and 2 weeks to write the pilot episode called Help Wanted. Harmon and Roiland, along with Nick Jennings, came back with a pitch that impressed the network executives so much they needed to step outside. The executives said they were exhausted from laughing. When Rick and Morty started production on its first season, the writing staff consisted of 7 people. Justin Roiland and Dan Harmon led the team as co-creators. Tom Kaufman, Ryan Ridley, Wade Randolph, and Eric Acosta joined them as staff writers. Mike McMahon worked as a writer's assistant, but also received writing credit for his contributions. This group of 7 people created all 11 episodes of Season 1. The team stayed relatively small compared to other animated shows on major networks. Harmon had experience running a writer's room from his previous show, Community, on NBC. He noticed major differences between the two setups. The Rick and Morty writer's room looked similar to the Community room physically. Both rooms even had the same style of whiteboards and workspace layout. But Harmon pointed out that the Rick and Morty writing staff was significantly smaller than Community's team. He also described the Rick and Morty room as more rough and tumble verbally. This meant the writers engaged in more direct, unfiltered discussions about ideas. Everyone had to contribute more, because there were fewer people to share the workload. The writing staff operates differently than most television productions in another important way. Like many Adult Swim shows, Rick and Morty's writers are not unionized with the Writers Guild of America. This non-union status affects how the show handles contracts, benefits, and working conditions. The situation changed somewhat in 2022 when production staff members at Rick and Morty filed a petition for a union election. These production workers included production managers, production supervisors, design assistants, casting assistants, storyboard coordinators, and office production coordinators. They wanted to join the Animation Guild to negotiate for better benefits and working conditions. Adult Swim and the parent studios initially declined to voluntarily recognize the union. The production workers then filed with the National Labor Relations Board to hold an election. The actual writing process at Rick and Morty follows a specific structure that Harmon developed. The writers first meet together as a group to discuss ideas. These brainstorming sessions include personal anecdotes from the writers' lives and thoughts about science fiction concepts. The team uses 3 large boards in the writers' room. One board holds general high-concept story ideas. Another board contains the story outline using Dan Harmon's story circle method. The third board breaks down the episode into acts and scenes. Dan Harmon created a storytelling tool called the Story Circle that the writers use for almost every episode. The Story Circle simplifies Joseph Campbell's hero's journey from 17 steps down to just 8 steps. Campbell's hero's journey is a template that describes common patterns in myths and stories from around the world. Harmon wanted something simpler that he could use quickly in a television writer's room. He developed his Story Circle in the late 990 seconds when he felt stuck on a project. The 8 steps form a circle that shows how a character changes through their adventure. The 8 steps of the Story Circle are simple. Step 1 shows the character in their comfort zone, their normal world. Step 2 reveals what the character wants or needs. Step 3 has the character go somewhere or do something new to get what they want. Step 4 is the search, where the character looks for their goal. Step 5 is finding it and getting what they wanted. Step 6 shows the price of getting what they wanted, usually a negative consequence. Step 7 has the character return to where they started. Step 8 shows how the character has changed from their experience. Harmon uses the Story Circle for both the main plot and subplots in each episode. In the Season 2 episode Morty Night Run, Harmon showed how the Story Circle works for 2 different storylines. Morty's main story follows all 8 steps when he tries to save an alien named Fart. Jerry's subplot also follows the same 8 steps when he gets dropped off at a daycare center for Jerry characters. The Story Circle creates structure, but allows for creativity and surprises. Harmon has explained that this method removes all the hard and repeated work from the task of breaking a story. After the writers discuss ideas and settle on a concept, they break the story together. Breaking a story means developing its consistency and creating a logical beginning, middle, and conclusion. The writers make sure the plot makes sense, and the characters act in believable ways. Once the team breaks the story, they assign a writer to create a 2-page outline. This outline includes the basic plot points, but not the detailed dialogue or jokes. The outline then goes to a team of storyboard directors. These directors produce a complete rough draft of the storyboard. A storyboard is a series of drawings that shows what happens in each scene, like a comic book version of the episode. One method the storyboard artists used was post-it notes. They would draw scenes on post-it notes and arrange them on boards to test different sequences. Most of the dialogue and jokes get added during this storyboard stage. The storyboard directors add funny lines, visual gags, and character moments. Writer and storyboard director Sean Brookshire said this process resembles how cartoons were made in the early days of animation. Roiland does considerable improvisation when recording dialogue. He wants the characters to feel natural and spontaneous. This improvisation adds another layer of creativity after the storyboard is complete. The voice recording sessions include the full cast of actors in the same room together. Voice actor Tom Kenny, who worked on the show, described this as old radio show style recording. Having everyone in the room at the same time allows the actors to play off each other's energy and timing. The writing pace could be surprisingly quick. Meriwether Williams, a writer on the show, explained in an interview that she and Mr. Lawrence would write a draft for an episode in an afternoon. They would finish their work by 4 p.m. During the COVID-19 pandemic, the writers worked remotely via Zoom from 10:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. with a 2-hour lunch break. Showrunner Scott Martyr initially worried that a comedy writing room could not exist via Zoom. The writers proved him wrong, though he noted that jokes that failed would land with a particular Zoom thud. Harmon said the remote rooms were more efficient but less fun than working together in person. The small team size meant each writer had to do more work. When Harmon described it as heavy lifting from everybody, he meant that everyone needed to contribute significantly. In a larger writer's room, some writers might specialize in certain tasks or contribute less frequently. With only 6 or 7 writers, Rick and Morty could not afford to have anyone sit back. Every writer needed to pitch ideas, help break stories, give feedback, and solve problems when scripts ran into trouble. This intense collaborative environment created the show's unique voice, but also required serious commitment from everyone involved. The show made a major change for Season 3 by hiring 4 new female writers. This created a gender-balanced writers' room for the first time with 3 men and 3 women. The new writers were Jane Becker, Erica Rosby, Sarah Carbiner, and Jessica Gao. Harmon explained his philosophy about balanced writers' rooms in an interview. He said the goal is not just getting women into the room, but having gender balance. When nobody outnumbers anybody else, Harmon said. Nobody represents any gender, and nobody's an ambassador to anything. This balance allowed all the writers to pitch ideas more freely without feeling like they had to represent their gender. The gender-balanced room affected the show's content. Harmon and Roiland noticed that both the men and the women could increase their attention on the female characters Beth and Summer. Before Season 3, in the all-male writers' room, the writers would second-guess themselves when writing stories for Summer. They would wonder if they understood how teenage girls actually think and behave. With a mixed room, the writers felt freer to pitch random ideas without worrying about gender representation. This freedom resulted in better stories for Beth and Summer in Season 3. Rick and Morty's small writing team approach had limits. The show became known for long gaps between seasons. After Season 2 ended in 2015, Season 3 did not premiere until 2017. Part of this delay happened because Harmon took a break to work on other projects. The small team size also meant the show could not produce episodes as quickly as series with larger staffs. In 2018, Adult Swim ordered 70 new episodes in a long-term deal. Roiland said this big order would help them minimize the gaps between seasons to no more than a year because they could better schedule their time. The 2023 Writers Guild strike further delayed production. The 8th season would not release until 2025 because of the strike's impact on the production schedule. These delays frustrated fans who wanted more episodes faster. However, the small team and careful story development process helped create the show's distinctive quality. Rick and Morty became praised for fitting feature film amounts of plot into 21-minute episodes. The dense storytelling and complex narratives became a hallmark of the show's style. The small writers' room approach influenced other shows in the animation industry. Several former Rick and Morty writers went on to create their own animated series. Mike McMahon, who started as a writer's assistant on Season 1, became a showrunner for later seasons. He later co-created Solar Opposites with Justin Roiland and created Star Trek: Lower Decks. Writer Michael Waldron went on to write major Marvel Cinematic Universe projects including Loki, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, and future Avengers films. Jeff Loveness became a writer for Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania. These writers have joked about cashing in on our Rick and Morty street cred. The show's success with a tiny team proved that animated comedies do not require massive writing staffs to succeed. Rick and Morty won Emmy Awards for Outstanding Animated Program multiple times. It became one of the most watched television comedies for adults between 18 and 24 years old. The small team created something that resonated with millions of viewers worldwide. The intensive collaborative process where everyone does heavy lifting produced remarkably consistent quality across seasons. The non-union status of the writing staff remains a point of discussion in the animation industry. While the production workers filed to unionize in 2022, the writers themselves stayed non-unionized. This arrangement is common at Adult Swim, but different from major network shows where writers typically belong to the Writers Guild. The non-union status affects working conditions, benefits, and job security. Some industry observers see this as a negative aspect of Adult Swim's production model, while others point out it allows for more flexible and experimental approaches to television production. The Rick and Morty writers' room shows that television production can work with much smaller teams than traditional models suggest. 7 writers created a show that competed with and often surpassed programs made by much larger staffs. The key seems to be having talented people who work well together and commit fully to the collaborative process. Every person contributing heavily creates a shared ownership of the work. The small team size means less bureaucracy and faster decision-making. Ideas can move quickly from pitch to storyboard without passing through many layers of approval. This approach to animation writing has changed industry expectations. New shows now see Rick and Morty's model as proof that small can be powerful. The story circle technique that Harmon developed has spread beyond Rick and Morty. Other writers study and use Harmon's 8-step method for their own projects. The emphasis on character change and emotional growth within comedy has influenced how other animated sitcoms approach storytelling. Rick and Morty proved that animated comedies aimed at adults could be both funny and emotionally complex with sophisticated narrative structures. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe and I'll see you in the next video.